Could I
Okay,
have a,
so good evening. Calling the roll, Mayor Betty Resch,
here?
Vice Mayor Herman Robinson, Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here. How are you feeling, Commissioner McVoy?
Medium. I woke up about worse than yesterday, but feeling slightly better during the course of the day. We'll see for tomorrow.
Let's see what this does to me.
Thank you for asking.
We're expecting a miraculous recovery.
I wish the pledge of allegiance, and I'll lead it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
United States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Visible.
Liberty.
Liberty and justice.
I love the delay.
Totally threw me off yesterday.
I know. I said, what is he talking about? We have one item on the agenda tonight. It is a budget workshop. We are all primed with our yellow highlighters and pens, waiting to be educated.
I have the Novocaine.
The Novogaine's waiting when I get home. So I guess I would ask the city manager to get us started.
Madam Mayor, thank you. And here we are, budget workshop number 2. And tonight, it's going to be an overview, general fund or general government funds. And again, we've talked individually leading up to tonight. I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed with so much information being thrown out at once, as there hasn't been any letdown of work and information in the last, I don't know, 90, 100 days yet. Have we made it to 100 days?
Are we at 100 days?
in office?
Must be, yeah.
When was it?
I think we're at 103 now.
Really?
103, right? I want to emphasize that after tonight, there will be a lot of opportunity for each of you to sit down and really dive into the individual departments with the department directors who are also present to answer any specific questions you may have. Okay, Bruce Miller will take you through a presentation and you'll see the graphs and you'll see the pie charts and everything kind of we've talked about. The initial backup that we provided is very intense with numbers, and then you'll start to kind of piece everything together tonight. Okay, so it is a process. This is number 2 of probably 2 more workshops ahead of us. In July, we'll be talking about the enterprise funds. At that point is when we'll have Stantec come and start doing the modeling. You've heard a little bit about the modeling in real time, and we'll start to talk about rates and fees and how those impact our enterprise operations. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Bruce Miller, our finance director. And before we get started, I do want to recognize our budget team, Andre McAden. Did I pronounce it right? I butchered that. McAden, I was close. Andre's been with us year and a half, and Andre's our controller. And right behind him is Dan. I'm not even gonna attempt. Dan is our new budget manager, and he's been with us. Have you made it a month? About a month.
Welcome aboard.
And our assistant finance director, Yannick, I'm not gonna try to do that. How do you pronounce it, Yannick? Kendahayo. And Yannick is our assistant finance director, who also has a primary focus on the audit side of the house. So we have an amazing nucleus. And again, there's an army of folks upstairs behind these gentlemen working away every day to ensure our finances and our processes are in line. So without further ado, Mr. Miller.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to try to set the table for you tonight before just going straight into the presentation, which is up on the TV at the moment. Just give me a little bit of opportunity to walk through the handouts that you receive. We're going to go line by line. And we'll go sarcastically, but as Juan mentioned, there's an awful lot of information here, and I want to make sure that you're familiar with the way it's set up. So before we can go from the different schedules, if you will, and you'll see how everything ties back. So we're doing the governmental fund. Governmental funds are your primary just that governmental fund, the general fund, and then the general fund, which is your primary, it has all the general government activities, be it commissioners, HR, finance, city manager, et cetera. And then there are special revenue funds type activities, be it IT, the internal service fund, it's broken into its own fund, but it's really not classified as an enterprise fund. And then we have a few other funds, the call fund, beach fund, that are truly not enterprise funds. So they're special revenue funds, which are included as part of the governmental funds. Then after that, we'll get into the enterprise funds, which establish rates and are a little bit more complicated than the revolving funds or the boy, right? So
essentially, this is our operating budget. This is our operating.
well, you can say the same thing about the enterprise funds too.
As opposed to the capital budget, I guess.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Those definitely. So the primary focus tonight in the PowerPoint is really on the general fund. We'll go through the special revenue fund, but we'll focus on the general fund because that's most difficult and that's where most of the challenges are that we'll need to address. So if you just flip the page until the schedule that says 1 of 37.
Mhm.
Okay. First thing I want to point out is that from left to right, we have the years. So if you want to do some analytical work, you can see trends and that type of stuff. So you have fiscal year 16 through fiscal year 19 actual. And then for budgetary comparison purposes, we have 19, 20, 21, and 22. The last column on the right is the change column. And that, to me, is very useful when you're going through an analytical review to see where there are issues and or concerns, because the big numbers will pop out to you and you can dive into those areas. Now, so the change column is from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 21. Now, that being said, there are 3 schedules, if you will, within these reports. Make it that much more complicated. So the first, if you look on page 1, and on page 2, it's a very, very high level summary. It has very high level classifications of revenues. And it has very high level of expenditures. Everybody with me? For example, it starts off with city commissioner. It does not get into all the line numbers of the city commissioner. Right. It's just as city commissioner. So it's a good snapshot, one page, basically, of all the different departments and what their budgets are. If you turn to page 3, this document will be used as the appropriation. Right? We will appropriate the budget based on these classifications. There's a little bit more detail with the revenues. See the tax breakdown, you'll see the permits and fees, a little bit more detail. Then the expenditures are broken down into 3 categories. Wages, broken down to benefits, and then they're broken down to operating expenditures. These classifications are important because, and are appropriated this way, so you don't move wages down to operating or operating up to your wages without a proper transfer and approval process. Benefits are separate because that's how we fund our health insurance and trust. So if we don't transfer the appropriate dollars to the trust funds, then we're not gonna have enough money to fund the health insurance. So that's a real basic overview of basically what I call the appropriation budget. And then if you turn to page 11, if we can. This is your line number detail. Every single line number on the general ledger is in this schedule. So for example, you'll see abnormal taxes, current CRA portion, any delinquencies, et cetera. It's a very detailed of all our revenue classifications and all our expenditure classifications. So if you turn to page 14, so you can see 4 lines, a summary page for revenue, page, the appropriation schedule, and you have 4 pages of revenue line numbers. The commissioners, this is in the first department that jumps on, you'll see that you have regular salaries, FICA taxes, the pension contributions, all the different benefits. And then on page, well, starting on page 15, you'll see the detailed numbers or accounts that are used to expend funds. So all these categories are rolled up to those prior summaries. So, for example, if we stay on the city commissioner's budget, and if you just want to test the theory,
Page 14,
stay on
15.
page 15.
15, 15.
15. And if you turn to page 1, you look at the first expenditure line number, the city commissioner, you'll see in the 22 budget, $450,000.
Right?
Right? If you turn to page 15, lo and behold, down the halfway through, you'll see that same number as both department expenditures, $450,000. And then the change number.
Okay. For 2022, on page 1, it's 450, 800, and on page 15, it's 450, 800.
What does it mean when the numbers are in red
Hmm,
on page 15?
on the account description.
On the account description,
That was not the government market, just to see something like that.
I'm sorry?
We should have really turned it back to.
So there's no, okay,
There's no indicator.
Yeah. no.
okay, thank you.
And I have a question about, the codes in general. We're looking at these and we really don't know what they are, 45 and then 10.
we will be giving you a cheat sheet.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Mayor, and if I may, really, it's a chart of accounts. It's more of an accounting back of the house of the office. You'll get used, as you see this more and more, the groupings of where certain type of expenses lie within the department.
Mhm.
Repair and maintenance, there's promotional activities and whatnot. The methodology that Bruce is explaining is repeatable throughout the department, any department you pick. It's how the budget structure is laid out.
Right.
So we're right now, we're really first base, just trying to break this document down, because as the budget workshops move forward, this is a very fluid process. Okay, numbers are changing every day as we hone things down. The more conversations that we have as a group, more direction that we get, we start to hone and fine tune the numbers with a goal of adopting officially a budget in September.
Mhm.
So this is, step 2 in a multi-step process. So again, our goal is to give you guys the information so you can make these informed decisions. There's a lot of stuff here you're not going to use, but you get the historical perspective dating back to actuals back to 2016. But the primary focus typically is 21, 22, and you can use things for trends, especially in the revenue side or even on the expenditure side, what's trending and what are the indicators that are causing these trends? So, Bruce.
I have a quick question. Is there, so for these services that are shared amongst departments, like right now it says for the city commissioners, the internal IT support, we're saying, you know, how do you come up with the numbers of what you're allocating to each department? Shared.
Well, I'll use IT as an example. The IT director, Melanie, has a detailed spreadsheet. Probably has 10 to 20 tabs on the bottom. And they track each of the expenditures. They track the different software applications and different chargeback activities, if you will. And then based on the number of PCs, for example, that you have, there's a cost allocation for the number of PCs and the telephones. There's an allocation for that. So she has a very, very detailed and methodical spreadsheet that will, then what she does is says, this is what I need as a budget for fiscal year X. And then, or allocates a portion of that total to all the different operating departments that we provide services for. So you'll see the commissioners have an allocation, which will be different than the city managers, which will be different from finance. It's all based on activity, the number of components and units we use as a department.
Like our
Very
iPhones.
formulaic driven. And it varies from department from division to division to division.
Right.
Cell phones, laptops.
But so of 100% of IT, we, the city commission, get, our share is X amount, the 93,000, whatever it is. Okay.
So then when I'm seeing other contractual service, $20,000, it doesn't tell me what that was.
Right.
2 years, 19 and 19, there was nothing. And now we're back to 20 grand.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up.
Building blocks. Here's the next block.
Now you're going to need your Ouija board, which I will send you. But
At no charge.
right, that is in what, if you turn to through page 37,
Page 37?
past that. Then you'll get into what's called the model line.
Yep.
report.
Which I couldn't make head or tail of.
Listen, the first set of numbers, you'll see that these are all revenue activities.
Yep.
So let's move until you get to the
Page 6.
six.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, page 6, you'll see the detail for the system. So it starts with all the salaries and whatnot, but then on the operating budgets, you'll see each line number with different expenditures that are associated with that. So your training and registration, you're seeking 10,000, I'm sorry, 35,000. I'm looking at the wrong one.
Combined,
Yeah, 10,000.
travel, training, lodging, those two groupings, so account 40-10.
Are we at, what page are we on?
Yeah,
So page 6, it should look like this.
Yeah,
yeah,
It's the detail. This
right.
gets into the detail. So
Right.
for
I
example,
see 40-10, yeah.
yeah,
But my question was the contractual service. All here it says is future commission initiatives, $104,000.
right. So Madam Mayor, if I may,
Please.
Can you explain that?
this particular account, okay, is an account that we need to essentially build out. Okay, and you'll notice this other handout here, this Excel spreadsheet, which we'll get to in a minute. This is
Okay.
kind of our add-on. I don't want to call it a wish list, but these are add-ons because what we embarked on for FY 22 budget prep was a zero-based budget. And zero-based meaning that our direction to the departments was to take your FY 21 totals, move those over to 22, and then be prepared to justify anything over that zero baseline. So essentially, we're starting from zero, but you're starting off current baseline. Then from that, we created a supplemental, we'll call it a wish list of items. Maybe there's conversations we've had throughout the months since you've been in office. So they'll be on here, and we'll talk about this shortly. You will see descriptions, and these are manually put in by the departments. You can see where we know more information, very specific, the conferences you go to and whatnot. An account like professional services could be somewhere where we budget for like dollars for scholars. Let's say there's an initiative that you want to sponsor, or it's something that means a lot to you, and you want to budget money aside, whether it's supporting the high school band, maybe we want to send all the football kids to, and it's going to cost A. Or there's a contribution to the homelessness initiative in Palm Beach County, and we want to donate that.
And that's that 104.
Right, so from the
It's
one,
not really contractual services.
right, and a lot of what drives the appropriate buckets is Gatsby general accounting principles. Did I butcher that?
Yeah, you did.
Chart of
They're all laughing over there.
but they're speaking Juanese, right? It may get repurposed to something different. It could end up becoming a promotional activity that then gets recharted to a different account.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's sort of a discretionary fund for us to do stuff.
In a way, yes, in very much in a way. Now, what we not have to get to through the budget process are, what are those initiatives?
Hmm.
And what is that dollar amount? This is literally a placeholder.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, so what we did is yesterday to demonstrate an example of this being a fluid process. Initially, when the budget, this was put in probably weeks ago.
Right.
Okay, then we have internal meetings and we kind of massage numbers. And we said, okay, $100,000. Okay, historically, we haven't had that much. Let's do 10,000 per person, and let's start at 50. And then let's ask them individually or in a budget workshop, what are some initiatives? Think about it and give us some feedback.
Okay.
So you control your budget, okay? You have input in designing and creating your budget, just like Lauren Bennett would in leisure service. All right, and we'll help guide you in where we put those those charges in the proper accounts.
Thank you.
So.
Could I, from a distance here, interrupt slightly? Can you all be real explicit about saying page numbers as you move around? Because I'm trying to hang on, and it's rough to ride the horse without knowing where you are.
Right now, we're on page 6 of the
Avalon.
Avalon.
Is there a way to show Commissioner McBoy?
He's got the book.
Yeah, he's got the book, okay, just to verify.
You have the book, right?
Electronic.
He has the book.
Oh, right.
I have it electronic, so it helps if I know, like, this is 6 of the 37-page file, right?
No,
Nope, six
this is
of,
6 of the second group, which is an Avalon.
After the.
After 37, it's the next group.
is this a dot matrix printer you guys use
It's
for these forms? It looks
Sure does.
exactly like, I was like, where did they get this archaic printer?
Courier, it's like.
I could just hear it upstairs. I'm like, oh my
You
God.
can hear it, right? We're gonna bring back the green bar.
I'm bringing back my age now. I'm showing my age now, right?
Actually, that green bar was helpful. It had lines. I liked it, yeah. Okay, so are you with us, Mr. McCoy?
You said page 6?
Yes, of the second group that looked like, up on top, it says budget preparation worksheet for fiscal year 2022. It's the second set of pages. They look very different from, just go to page 38, as though there was a page 38.
We should consider maybe buying a document camera. Now that we have all the Zoom technology and stuff, so anybody looking remotely can see what Bruce is looking at. So put that in the budget somewhere.
Under initiatives,
Yeah,
That
take
would
that
be-
from my.
That would be Commissioner Stokes'
this is
initiative.
how we build a budget.
It would be very helpful, at least if documents had a very clear name and one could refer to document A, B, or C, or whatever. And a
I'm going to
page.
say something, Commissioner McFoy. This is the kind of workshop documents that would probably be more helpful if you actually had, I know you want to say paper, but this is
He has the
really,
paper.
no, he's looking at electronically, he said. Do you have a paper book?
You don't have this book?
I have a book that is 18 or 20 inches wide and huge. I don't know if
That's
that,
what we're looking at. That's what we're referring to. It's gigantic.
And that has no page numbers to it.
Yes, it does.
Upper right-hand corner.
First, it's 1 through 37, and then after 37, up on the upper right-hand corner says page 6, 7, whatever page you're on.
I think Chris and I are on the same paper saving plan, so if I have a book, you
Okay,
should probably have a book.
well, he wasn't looking
He
at
has
it.
a book.
He just didn't know.
He just. well, he-
My section, the first section goes up to page 71. And then who knows what it does? It's,
Wait, you're not,
No,
No, the blue tab, the very first blue tab.
right, so go backwards from that 71, Chris, until you get to 6. There's two different, that we could have probably used a tab in between these two things. Okay, we didn't get it, it's okay. So there's basically two different reports in the same tab.
right, the first red tab.
first red tab.
It goes 1 through 37, and then after that, it's,
Blue. Well, mine's blue.
well, no, then it keeps going until you get to
It
the
keeps
blue.
going, yeah.
But it's a lot in between 37 and
6.
6 or,
Mine goes to page 71.
Chris,
So pretend you're looking from the beginning for page.
so look at
38.
page 6.
Chris, look at the camera for a minute.
Can you see that, Commissioner?
I can't read that, sorry.
It's
Okay,
I can
he-
Zoom in.
It's still too small to read.
It's
If you
page
start at the
6.
beginning, go to page 37 and pretend you are looking for page 38.
Right,
What you'll see is a new page 1.
right.
On the upper right-hand corner, not on the bottom.
It looks completely different.
That gets me into building fund permits. I doubt that's where we want to be. I find this very unhelpful, but
Well, we're all doing it pretty, we're, there's 37 pages, 37 pages, and then after 37, it looks completely different. If there's no boxes, it's just, at the top of it says budget preparation worksheet, page 1.
yep, I do not have that. After page 37, I go straight into building permit fund. Apparently, I have a different flavor of the book. Who knows? It's what I was given on Thursday, and I have not.
They're all the same.
This?
Just on the page
Did
6 on the top.
kind of young, but do you know?
What's on page
Going to
6?
the next.
Yes.
tab.
First, second, third.
And then you go to the
I
next
feel like
tab.
when I'm up here.
Yeah, no, you don't go to the next tab, you just turn the page after 37, you just turn the page.
And the next page after 37 of 37 is building permit fund. Can't help it. That's what I have.
Okay. Something happened there.
And before the 1 through 37, I have something or other that goes up to page 71.
It's just reversed, all right. So, okay,
So
it's just
these
those
got
two things
switched.
got reversed.
Yeah.
So look at page 6 of 71.
We get paid the big bucks.
All right. Says 153501 is the timestamp.
Yep, that's it.
Here we are.
All right, thank you, thank you.
We're probably moving on from this page.
I'm gonna smack you if there wasn't a plexiglass there. All right, sorry for the interruption. Bruce, what are we doing now?
Now we're going, if you take that at your pleasure, to the PowerPoint.
I'm delighted. Oh, great, okay. And that's where we have our books.
Yes, ma'am.
Chris?
The intro.
Hey, Chris, do you have, I'm afraid to ask.
Oh, does he have it?
Do you have this little book
Yes.
stapled together? Okay, I'm told you do.
I was emailed a PowerPoint, but I can see the PowerPoint perfectly fine.
Okay.
Great, that's great, thank you.
My clothes he had today.
So, not to go back too far, but if there are any questions relative to how to navigate this document or
Don't
more
ask.
information, please let me know. My staff will be happy.
My, yeah, and there will be questions because I'm none of us, I mean, I have never dealt with this sort of situation.
It's all very logical. It's just becoming familiar with the document.
That's what people tell me.
Yes. Okay, so the presentation tonight, there's, again, as Juan stated, this is a very, very, very high level presentation. If we want to get into the specific departments and the specific line numbers, recommend that we do that during the
And
one-on-one.
when you say high level, what I hear you saying is bottom line. It's the,
And talking about budget drivers, it's more of the policy type familiarity.
Nuts and berries. It's the,
nuts and berries.
yeah.
The bread and butter.
So the first conversation we'll have is just a high level revenue conversation discussion. Look at some of the changes. So that's cat out of the bag. The primary change is the tax levy. We're getting approximately $800,000 more in tax revenues than last year.
Good.
Then we'll get into the expenditure discussion. I'm just reading off of page 2 at the moment. And what the expenditure drivers are. Then we'll have a conversation to controllable versus non-controllable costs. And I think that will be very forthcoming and telling as really how much flexibility you have in your budget. The other thing it shows is that compared to other municipalities, and I'm familiar with anyone, your salaries are very low, proportionate to your operating expenses. A lot of communities are 50 and 60% of your budget or salaries and benefits. You don't see that.
Is that including their, is that including their police and fire though?
Yes,
In those in those other cities? Because we don't have that.
yes, but excluding that also.
Okay.
Yeah, so
You're saying like within each department? Or are you
Overall.
saying overall or within each department?
overall,
Even backing out, most municipalities have their own fire, rescue, and police. You back that out and they're still around 60%
a
penetration.
lot of them are. Yeah.
Okay.
60%.
Yeah, now that could be because of schools. There's a whole different kind of, of relationships. But the point I'm trying to make is that the operating expense, you do have some flexibility because you're not as heavily concentrated in your salaries and benefits, with the exception of pension. And we'll talk about that a lot in the coming weeks. Supplemental requests, you'll see that there are, in addition to what's in the budget at the moment, there are additional requests. And then labor negotiations, what the impact of 1%, and also what the impact of a $15 per hour wage is. We'll see what that impact is.
Oh,
Program priorities, really, it's now taking your dollars and how do you want to move your dollars down and how can you change things up. Then I want to get into a conversation about fund balance and a proposed policy, if you will, which we'll be presenting to you, and what I call the waterfall, taking dollars and putting them into different buckets. So, and then finally, we'll conclude with what direction we would like staff to take. So on page 3.
Bruce, can I interject really quick before we move on? Can you back to the last slide? Just to clarify a couple of things that are important. When we talk about the ratio in payroll versus expense, a lot of that is a reflection of a organization that's been strapped resource-wise.
what?
Strapped resource-wise.
Right.
We're lean on FTE counts, full-time equivalent counts. Over the years, there's been a lot of budgetary disciplinary measures put in place. You guys know the history. I won't regurgitate it here.
Staff cutting staff, that's.
Cutting staff,
Not really.
years of no COLA increases, you know the stories.
Yeah.
Okay, so there, as I've told you all in conversations, there's usually an explanation of why we are somewhere along the timeline on different topics. Okay, so I didn't want to send out the wrong signals. Okay, it is a symptom of overall issue of as we grow this city and grow our tax base, Subsequently, you know, we grow our professional staff and our staffs and other roles. And you do what you can with the resources in front of us. And and that'll start to come clear, the picture will get clearer as we get deeper into some of this information, especially when we start talking about supplemental. And we start to talk about wants versus needs and have tos versus desire, you know, in those conversations.
And staff, I think to all of us is very important. So we're going to, talk about that.
Extremely important, which leads me to the next point that I want to be very clear with. The 1% impact is a placeholder for the purposes of looking at just concepts of what impacts look like. Okay. And it's very important that we're clear on this because we're going to the bargaining table with our 3 collective bargaining units very soon. So we don't want to send any wrong signals to anyone listening. All right, that we're going to be considering a 1% COLA because that's not the case. That's for the purpose of building and starting somewhere. Okay. But again, we're even in the process of setting up a shade meeting with all of you to talk about direction on how we want to proceed with our bargaining unit conversations. Okay, so again, this is a giant process, small building blocks at a time. All right.
And piggybacking on what Wanda said, the 1%, it's easy to multiply a number 2 by 1, right? So 3 or 4, whatever the number is.
I love my job. That's great.
So to my point, we don't want to send any wrong messages out. Okay, on that, you'll see page 3 of the revenue. And again, as you saw, there's a lot of detail for each one of these categories. But total revenues increased $672,000 over last year. You'll see the taxes went up. Your ad valorem taxes went up $805,000. And then state shared revenues, again, we can go into details.
No. Right.
They're intergovernmental.
For example, just give us a few
Just give us an
examples.
example.
Not just like,
Easy.
Yeah, gas tax.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
The breakdowns in there.
right.
okay. That's
So taxes other, is that penny sales tax? Is that what taxes other is?
Any sales tax is into its own special.
So what would taxes other be if gas tax goes under the state shared revenue? The second line under ad valorem.
Only special.
60.
Charges for the revenue. Which one you want?
On this. on your
taxes other.
Taxes other,
Page.
on the slide they're on right now, the second line. It says taxes other, 5.145.
On our PowerPoint.
It's a combination of sales tax, revenue tax, there's some utility communication taxes in there.
Utility service tax.
So if you take page 10, multiple voices talking.
Electricity, telecommunications tax, water taxes, gas taxes, all those mixed in.
With the other,
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you,
that'll be on page 10.
I got it,
Breakdown.
thank you.
So revenues, again, $672,000. Turn to page 4. Same information. See the changes, the taxes to 31% of the city's revenues. Other revenues, 40%, state shared, 13%. And permits, fees, and special assessment, 3%. Other revenues are predominantly the transfers from the different enterprise funds.
Different.
Transfers from the enterprise funds and
Oh, okay.
the chargebacks. And that kind of stuff.
So the electric revenue would be in there, that 40%.
But that 2 million that comes from the CRA is just CRA dollars though. correct?
Yeah, that's a
So that's
transfer
not-
out.
Okay, that transfers out. It's not gonna stay as part of our revenue. Okay,
Where
You'll
do you see
see,
that?
I gross it up.
okay.
Okay, so we record total revenues and we record the transfers out.
Yeah, that's more for the public hearing, that money goes
Yes, ma'am.
back out.
Yeah.
to the
Where do
CRA.
you see that?
It's in the breakdown under taxes. It's got CRA is
10.
1.9 million on page 10. I just want to be clear that we're not, or actually it's projected at 2.46 on page 10. Just so
37.
know that goes back out into the CRA district.
And we'll see an expense transfers out.
Thank you.
So just to clarify on the other revenues, which is 40% of our income, about what percentage of that is coming from the electric versus within that 40%? How does,
It's on page 10 of when you were at page 6, go to page 10 on that long spreadsheet.
well, obviously that's a different page. 10.
Well, 10 of 71,
31, 37.
37.
10 of 37.
10 of
So 10 of 37, Chris.
It's actually page 13 where we start with the transfer fund, the different activities. So the electric fund transfers in $1.9 million. And their franchise fee is $4.5 million.
Page 11.
13.
13. Okay. On the bottom page. Page 13.
Yeah.
And you'll see that there's no increases for fiscal year 22, because I'm having to do the allocation based on the current budget, the indirects and all that kind of stuff.
So 1 million, just so I understand, $1,924,900. Is that what we got? That's what we're projected to get from the electric utility?
For indirect and direct chargebacks. And then there's a franchise fee of $4.5 million.
Okay, so from the electric utility, I just want to make sure that I understand this. We get the sum of those two numbers, the
Yes.
1924 and the 4536. Thank you.
And you'll see the same thing for the water and refuse, et cetera, et cetera.
Good.
Okay, so I want to focus on next is the budget driver.
Okay.
And I sent you this document, I believe, but just to go through the on page 5.
Mhm.
Is, again, the net change in our revenues is $672,000. And the amount of money, so if I change it, was $611,000 down at the bottom.
Mhm.
It's a change in that case. So we started $672,000 of additional revenues, and then we subtract from that increases to the budget. And one of the increases, the IT chargebacks, the accountant and the financial services.
There are city staff.
City staff. If you recall, we were talking about 3 additional staffing. So that's
Oh, this is what we're looking for. Okay.
the police department's budget. The required pension obligation payment went up $360,000. And then the 2% sheriff's contract is equal to $270,000. The annual required pension obligation for the fire went up $215,000. Public services, or annual expenses that were not included in the fiscal year 21 budget, we skipped a year, but railroad crossing maintenance of $260,000.
So last year, no money was allocated for that?
We did through the capital program. And then $200,000 for materials and supplies. The materials and supplies is your potholes and that kind of activity where it really is an ongoing expense and more operational and capital. It's not an improvement to the road. It's not something that's. It's maintenance.
No, but is this $200,000? I'm a little lost on where we're at. So you're saying that particular road maintenance, materials and supplies is 200,000, projected to be $200,000 more this year than it was, or the total is 200,000?
The total is 200,000.
That's so just so, again, I'm really new at this. So that means that the city budget allocates $200,000 a year for basic road maintenance, potholes, filling up things, that sort of just that. Okay.
I mean, I'll defer to Jamie if he
Well,
wants.
that doesn't seem like a lot of
That
money.
does not seem like a lot of money. Mr. Brown,
Andrews, this was the 750 that was moved
No.
to.
This is a $200,000 for materials in your operating budget.
an increase.
Okay, so we have different pots of money for our roadway maintenance and our infrastructure maintenance. So in our materials account, this is what we would use to purchase asphalt, concrete, stuff like that we're doing in the house.
Right.
There's another account that you'll see, I think it's 750,000, which is down capital, and that's for our other contractual. So for projects that are too large for us to do in-house, just
Right.
very large segments of pavement or asphalt.
Yeah.
That's what we would actually contract out.
The 750.
Correct. So in that's also maintenance. It's just not maintenance we're doing in-house, where we're purchasing the material ourselves.
So what got that on this list? Because this is like changes. So did you spend no money on road materials and supplies last year? Or is this like a guaranteed fixed, we have no say over it because it's in, like, how does this particular item get on this tiny table?
Last year, the funding, if you will, for these expenditures were through the capital budget.
So they came out of capital.
Sales tax or something else?
Right.
Why the change? Why changing? I'm just curious. I don't,
It's an ongoing operation.
so it should be more. It's not a capital project. It's an operational.
It's an improved, it's not, when you capitalize something, you're expanding the life for more than 5 years. And it's usually $50,000 or more.
Mhm.
Now, it's in aggregate, it's $200,000, but a pothole here and a
Right,
pothole here
right.
doesn't quite qualify for a long-term improvement.
So last year, I believe, so if I have memory correct, I guess, if I have this right, we used other funds like the penny sales tax to pay for ongoing
No, the
expenses,
purpose
and
of-
now we have to start paying for them out of our.
The purpose of, we skipped a year, really, and put more of the focus and effort onto the capital activity.
Okay.
All right.
But we didn't skip a year of maintenance.
Sorry, excuse me.
We didn't skip a year of maintaining our roads.
We did not know. No,
That funding just came from a different source.
correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Would there be any other changes in the sheriff's contract? Other than just a normal percentage?
The sheriff's contract, that was the $270,000. That's a 2% increase.
Right. Is there any other expectation of change in that contract?
In that contract? I'm not familiar with that particular.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Sure.
if I jump in, just update the group. The mayor and I met with Captain Baird and Major Dean 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and their preliminary budget number to us was a 3% increase.
3%.
And we had conversations, and the sheriff agreed to reduce that to a 2%. The LISA, which is what that agreement is coming forward to you at the August 3rd commission meeting for approval. So the 2% is where the number sits now with the BSO contract. And I think last year they held it at a 0% increase, I think.
Yeah,
it
they
was.
did. There was no increase last year.
Right. So that'll be coming to you for a more in-depth conversation at the August 3rd commission meeting.
But that's really not a one-year contract. That's a 5-year contract. address every year? Is that how that works?
Yes, the annual increase gets addressed every year.
And that 2% is across the board to all the municipalities. Nobody's getting a lower or a higher raise. Clear. Okay,
All right,
Now, really quick, just to try to help clarify, when it comes to road maintenance, Jamie, Public Works has multiple pots. If you recall back to the sales tax conversation that we had at the previous workshop, there was $1 million line item that was appropriated already, which is money that's being used right now by Public Works to make road and sidewalk improvements.
Mhm.
You will see a similar request for the other $1 million. If you recall, there was a balance. There was 2 million that was appropriated. We've appropriated $1 million this year. The ask is gonna be to take the remaining $1 million and apply to the $750,000 for road sidewalk improvements, which you'll see in the supplemental package within Public Works. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And then eventually we will talk about the road improvement fund, which is another fund when it comes to roads. All right, so again, there's a lot of moving pieces to this conversation. So the $200,000, think of it as that's your hot patch everyday work.
right.
And then the 750,000, which luckily it has been borrowed, it has been appropriated, will go towards the 750, which you see, which is above the zero-based budgeting. So we're trying to be consistent on how we demonstrate and display information on these sheets. If we just upload everything into here, then we really didn't do zero-based budgeting. And so we kind of got to build this budget together. Some things will not make the cut, some things will make the cut, or maybe there's a reduction in the total amount that ultimately gets adopted. All right, Bruce.
Okay.
thank you. And then 3/4 of the way down, you'll see less, the net change in employee. These are reductions. So the expenses for salaries decrease overall $211,000.
And was that because of vacancies that were not filled?
And allocations out there charged back to different departments.
Okay,
We had $192,000 decrease in debt service because of how we restructured
right.
the bonds back in October and
Mhm.
December, November. Excuse me. And then the cumulative net changes of all the little changes throughout the different operating budgets. So if we go back and add the changes through all the different columns, it will come up to about $85,000. So those are the big changes, if you will, relative to the budget. And that's $611,000. If you go to page 2 of your budget book, detail
2 of 37?
2 of 37, that's right. You'll see that same $611,000.
And we're considering the vacancies as a savings or,
In the current budget, we're spending $211,000 less in salaries than we did last year.
And are we considering filling those vacancies and that'll be something
That we're
There's
talking
that will
also
count later?
part of the allocation, how we allocate the salaries back to different departments outside of the general fund. So for example, HR, okay, has different accounts outside of just the general fund. They have insurance trust and they have a health insurance trust. Those allocations from that department were shifted to those trusts where they were spending more time on activity and risk management and that kind of thing.
assuming we're not going to fill those vacancies,
Again, it's not all vacancies, it's allocation.
allocations. It's in counting, okay.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yep.
It's very common to see what we call attrition, unused payroll
Right.
drop to fund balance. And it can be for various reasons. It can be for redistribution of positions. For example, a department director that oversees 7 divisions,
Mhm.
their salary would get spread out amongst
The division.
the divisions.
Right.
In addition, when we budget for a position, we budget for 2,080 hours, which is a full-time equivalent of what it would cost for a full fiscal year. When there's new positions, sometimes we don't get anyone in-house and hired and on ramp until maybe January.
Right.
There's savings there that drop. Okay, and then there's vacancies and there's always turnover. So it's more than likely you're gonna see every year some sort of salary change that's beyond a request of new positions for a bunch of various reasons. So it's very common to have that, but we capture that as, in essence, savings.
Right.
Okay, but it doesn't mean, depending on the position, and this is getting into the weeds, the next fiscal year, it may be under 2,080 hours. Okay, so it's kind of a moving number, which we'll get into pay plan in subsequent workshops and how all that ties in.
I can't wait.
It's a lot, but we'll, one number at a time.
Okay.
All right, Bruce.
All right, thank you. And then I'll turn to page 6. This is from the presentation that we looked at detail on the Excel spreadsheet. But these are the expenditures and the changes for each of your departments within the general fund. So the budget for fiscal year 22, just going down to the bottom line, is $39.5 million, which is an increase over the previous year of 38.1. So the total change is $1.2 million.
Legal counsel, that's Tracivia and an outside counsel for lawsuits and things. Every lawyer's pay is in there. Okay.
But we turn to page 7. I think this is,
What are financial services?
Yeah.
You.
And that was, and you said you had 3 new positions. Is that why the jump from?
yes, ma'am.
And have you filled those or you're not filled them? Okay.
No, I can't fill them
Until-
until you tell me during an appropriation.
What a sense of power that could be.
And just a historical perspective on that, 'cause that can jump out as finance is adding 3 FTEs, accountants. Mayor, you have personal experience with this because we were grappling this with a couple of weeks ago. Historically, the city with finance with the turnover in the department, there's an audit level. I'll try to keep this simple. A certain number of staff that's needed in order to perform the fiduciary responsibilities of the finance department. It was an audit mark that we had to grapple with in the previous fiscal years that we were literally short-staffed. Adding the 3 accountants gets us up to a level, and with the fact that, to complicate more, we own our own electric utility, which is even more money rolling through that has to be accounted for. So the 3 accountants brings us up to a level that will satisfy staffing levels for an organization of this size and the budgets of this size, which is the conversation we had with folks up in Tallahassee.
Thank you.
So this wasn't, I don't want it to come across as we're just adding positions to add positions.
No, I don't think that the sense that I get is that we need those positions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so then we drop down to page 7. And I think, just going as a percent of budget, again, you'll see the total budget at the bottom of $39.5 million and change of $1.3 million. But the schedule also presents the percentages of the total budget. So for example, city commissioners represent 1% of the $39.4 million. And on down the line, and then you'll see different areas that have different magnitudes of impact.
Now, I'm assuming that leisure services went down because of COVID.
I actually have a dip because what he was referring to earlier about redistributing across the board. Part of our communications division, which actually services the whole city, is no longer going to hit just the general fund directly. We're reallocating that to hit all the different funds because we support all of them.
So on this chart, it looks like a decrease, but in fact, in other places, you pick it up. Okay.
It's a decrease to the general fund.
Right, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, on page 8. Which I was before, or alluding to earlier. budget or this presentation breaks down the expenditures by wages, benefits, and operating expenditures. Wage, being at $5.5 million increase, or actually decrease in $211,000 and represent 14% of your budget. Benefits, total $10.3 million. The increase of 5.6, those are primarily the pension obligation required annual required contribution, pension contribution, which represents 26% of the budget. So the subtotal on that, salaries and wages, salaries and benefits, 40%, and operating expenditures representing about 60%, and or the whole 100%. But again, I just think this is very telling in the fact that the wages are, I think, are at a respectable level.
Bruce, can you talk into the mic a little bit more?
Sure.
It's fading a little bit.
Yeah, my asthma is kicking in, I'm sorry. So controllable and non-controllable expenses. I've given it a little bit more detail. Just so that you can see where all the different component groups are. So again, your salaries and wages, benefits. This is just the employee, other than pension contributions, contract services, then road maintenance of the $200,000 that we just talked about. And then operating expenses are highlighted in yellow. That represents about 10% of your overall budget. And that's where most flexibility for budgetary purposes are. As you know, it's difficult to cut salaries, and the benefits are not to say that they can't be cut, but that's a more of a long-term issue. So the operating expenditures highlighted in yellow are really, when we do have a conversation relative to what needs to be done and where you can look, that would be your primary target.
Contract services are outsourced,
All those outsourced, right?
maintenance, lawn maintenance, groundkeeping, whatever.
Audit expenses, professional services.
When are we gonna have the operating expense conversation?
We're having that as we move forward. Yeah.
So we interjected because I don't want to hold up, I don't want to get off track.
Thank
No,
you.
I'm just highlighting this because what I'm trying to show is your discretionary funds that you can, change buckets with.
Okay,
And those.
and
turn
you want to
page.
listen to that now as we go?
Yeah.
So can I suggest an expense? Discretionary expense now, or?
Well, I would wait, if it's okay, I would wait till the end, because there's
That's.
a section in the presentation that will have that conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we get to the supplemental
That's
conversation,
what I was
we
asking.
can kind of open the floor up and.
Good.
Turn to page 10. These are all the different, really, that you don't have much or discretion in the pension costs, be it general employees pension, police or fire, the service plan. These are all pretty much baked in and required.
I have a question about that. So for these pensions, are they on like a schedule that we could look at, and is it predictable how much they're going to increase every year? It's not
No, not really.
because do we still pay into pensions
We have 3 pension plans.
for new hires still get?
The new hires are going into it's still the same pension plan, but it's a different benefit. Okay, so
It's not a
the
fixed.
employee pension plan, but our required contribution is a required contribution. Over the long term, our contributions will decrease because of those plan changes. but we still are required to pay the $4.5 million or whatever it is for that particular fund, as we are required to pay for the police and the fire. So the actuarial, just to give a little bit of background, the actuarial firm will take the prior year's returns, investment returns, and take the other assumptions, if you will, and tell us what we owe. It's not discretionary where we can say, well, we only want to fund X amount of dollars this year. And because that's how the pension plans historically have gotten problems. We're at 68% funded for the general employees. And we have an amortization period to get to 80 or 90% over a period of time. And that's what the actuarial will take a look at to try to hit the mark.
And this is for current employees,
Yes. But it's also for police.
because we still have the old ones that were taken care of,
Right,
yeah.
and those are closed accounts.
Closed, but still outgoing,
Yes, ma'am.
funded.
So we're probably, do we have public workshops on pensions, or is that something I should just pull up with you on an individual basis?
Those meetings are open. You're more than welcome to attend.
When are they?
Right into the room
Yeah.
next door.
No, when?
Oh, when?
Oh, when?
There's,
The third Tuesdays, I believe, of each month.
And the income from the pension fund is somewhere,
That goes to the pension. That's not even anywhere here.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Mhm.
July 13th, throughout the day, you all will be meeting with, what's your group? Davenport, who's our financial advisors that we use for the issuance of the bonds on the utility side.
is that who I met with?
Yes. The mayor met with us in the group last week to talk about pension and the possibility of issuing a pension obligation bond. So you will have a deep dive into all things pension. And that's coming up probably less than 2 weeks from now.
Busy day.
Yes.
Bring your snorkel.
And the actuarial firm.
Yeah.
Not the pension board's actuarial firm, but a independent.
Cities.
actuarial firm. He also, his name is David Boomershine.
and then that'll be on an agenda after they discuss it one-on-one.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
It'll be on an agenda.
yes.
Can I ask a question just relating to these non-controllable expenditures, the pension costs? Bruce, could you, or Juan, either one, could you give a rough idea of about how many people are involved in those first three: general employees, police, and fire, in each of those categories?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, I do not have that information in the back of my mind. I don't want to speculate. I'll be more than happy to give you those numbers first thing tomorrow morning. We can talk to Pension Resources, which is the city's, the firm that manages that for us. Oh,
I can talk a little bit about pension. So I can send you guys a copy of the
Introduce
valuation.
yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm Lauren Slade, I'm the Director of Human Resources for the City of Lake Forest Beach. I would love to maybe give you a quick summary on how the different pension plans work. There is one big plan for the general employees, but depending on when you're hired, your benefit is different, or even which union you're in. So tonight is not the night to go over that. So Bruce is going to go over
It's not,
how it's funded.
tonight is not.
No, unless you're really wanting to stay all night and you have lots of caffeine because
You and Commissioner Robinson have a wonderful little late night
I'll be
meeting.
glad to come and sit with you guys and go over like a quick summary. So you just kind of understand like what you're hired, what benefit you get. Commissioner McVoy's issue, all active employees are in one kind of pension plan or another. They're either in the general pension plan or they're in a 401A defined contribution. I'm glad to go over that. As far as like the different numbers, I can absolutely, every year that the actuaries provide an actual evaluation, which tells us how many people are in the plan, how many people are projected to get benefits, and how much we need to fund it to make sure that every single person that's ever been in that plan gets their very last penny.
And can we have any input into their investments?
And that's part of the pension board, and that's what Bruce is going to go over. I go over the administration for the employees, he goes over the money.
And there is no more,
And the pension board is independent. There's no policy from the commission to affect investments from the pension fund.
Usually, the board, it's usually the mayor. There's 2 employees, and I believe that there's a citizen.
And they
assigned
act
them.
independently of
Yes.
any policy decided by the commission.
Yes.
In a way.
you mean about where
Of
things,
course, they take advisement. So if there's a change in the plan that we make, they'll take it into advisement, but they don't take direction from us. They don't.
From us, meaning us here or
me?
From any of us.
No, but is your question where the money is
invested.
invested, like where, what they do is, I went to one of these meetings.
They have an investment advisor,
Right,
and then there's a fiduciary responsibility on the part of the board to make sure that it's spent with legally and wisely and within certain laws.
Yeah, if I can
We could
add on that,
Yeah, it's very, very complicated.
just to make sure everybody understands. The investment decisions, first of all, as Lauren said, there's a fiduciary responsibility for each board member. Number 2, there's a investment policy that has to be followed,
And who sets that policy?
the board.
The board, okay. I'm just trying to find out where we stand in relation to
The only
pension
direct,
policy.
it's indirect by your appointment. The pension board's appointment, the mayor, myself, and then the 2 at large, the 2 employee members.
there's no more defined benefit pensions, correct?
Yes, there is.
Ongoing, I mean, but it's like if I was hired today, it's not a benefit pension.
Yes, there absolutely is. So it goes by union. So the IB,
Oh,
yeah, and actually, you hear the term, the cash balance plan. The cash balance plan actually is defined benefit.
oh, okay.
It's that com.
So we're getting away from-
I'll give you the cliff notes. I would have to sit down this week and do that.
Thank you.
Terminology gets used interchangeably, maybe not necessarily correctly. So sitting down and having these detailed conversations with the appropriate staff is very important. Because defined benefit, it can be, some folks relate that to the old
Right,
defined benefit if you were hired pre-10-1.
the FRS pension.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's still that, there's still that same block,
Yeah.
that general pension, that defined benefit is still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it depends on what year you're hired and what union you're in as to what kind of benefit you get, but it's all that same big pot of money.
Okay.
And the pension, like the allocations don't go by, Lauren has cash balance and Juan has the pension. The pension people will actually tell us, okay, no, to fund this entire plan, this much money.
Right,
Figure out as you will.
okay.
And at some point, the commission verifies or votes or approves the board's investment policy. Not at all.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I think the most important thing is that we have that fiduciary, the responsibility is not to the, it's
Yes.
to the clients to make sure that we have the money and that we're acting in their best interest, that their pension will be funded, and that is their priority, and that is the oversight that they need, not us saying, well, I have a pet project, or I have this or that, or this other thing, or I'm gonna make more fees or money off of this transaction. Is that they give the advice based on the best return for their client, and I think that's super important. It's absolutely critical, and that's what we're doing.
Yes, it's all set by law. It's set by federal law. And everyone that's on the board has to go to certain training, and they have to go to recertification training. There's a lot that goes into it. So these people aren't just going in blind.
Right.
Socially, investing in different investments is important to me.
And I totally understand what you're talking about green things, unless not, and I get that. We really don't, the one meeting I've been to, making me an expert, of course. I didn't get a sense that that was the kind of thing that we could, and I don't think that, I think we could certainly raise that. I could certainly raise that at a meeting about, what kind of
Investment.
ethically.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just astounded to hear that West Palm's pension funds is investing in our Bohemian project here.
Yeah.
And whether we could affect our investments to benefit our city.
I think that's a little bit of a,
These are
we need to
usually
be acting in the
long-
best interest of our pension account. I think
And
that's
hope
good. That's a
investments
little,
in our city are the best interest of the account.
right, we gotta invest more on post.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm
Going down a
probably
trail.
investing through
Going down
a
the trail.
This is more like a
through a
cave.
real estate
Yeah.
investment.
Yeah.
These are conservative, long-term investments because these are for the long haul to make sure everybody gets their pension.
That's a good thing.
Okay, Madam Mayor, if we
We'll
continue,
get back out of the, yes, back on the path.
Please.
Bruce.
Gonna rescue me?
Send him a lifeline.
These pesky windows, I tell you.
All right,
They're never coming down.
Never.
kidding aside, so on page 10, just to kind of finish the conversation about controllable and non-controllable. If you go to the second line, to the bottom, you'll see that our non-controllable expenses total $26 million.
Wait, oh,
Which increased $855,000 over last year, which represents 68% total budget.
so the CRA got $1,910,000 in 2021. Okay.
That's us just transferring their,
Yeah,
Taxes back.
Yeah.
But because we record it as expense.
Mhm.
Okay, so getting into the fun conversation of the supplemental budget request. This schedule is augmented by this sheet that they don't have.
Oh,
The presentation presented by department, if you will, to the city commissioner. Budget request totaling $50 million, $50,000.
$50 million.
There you go.
Right on. Get to the headlines tomorrow.
ARPA plus. So you'll see that it started off as 104. It was brought down to $50,000. $10,000 at 5. Now the city manager increased or supplemental request total $18,000. And that's a combination of what you see here of the meetings, promotions, Citizens Academy, and office supplies. And then you'll see that the computer replacement, which was requested, was moved to the IT budget. So this is a roadmap of what was requested. If we were able to have a funding solution to what we had to come up with to include in the budget and or not to include in the budget. If you deem it is necessary, then we're going to have to find a activity, a program to reduce to balance the budget. If you turn the page 4, you'll see that we have $685,500 of unfunded programs or requests. So when you add that to a slide further back, and what I'm talking about, if you can go to page 14. Page 14.
this,
14-minute presentation. It's up on the screen. The current budget, as it was presented to you, has a $495,000 revenue shortfall. Expenditures exceed our revenue by $495,000. So we had to balance that to begin with. On top of that, you'll see that we have unfunded supplemental request of $654,000. And then further on, we'll be talking about the requested position totaling $132,000. You all add all that up, and this is where the previous slide of controllable and non-controllable takes home. We have $1.2 million, $1.3 million nut that we have to resolve. You know, does that mean eliminating or reprioritizing different programs? That's the conversation that as we move forward is going to be front and center.
Yeah, Bruce, and Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yeah.
can you explain to them, going back to the fact this is a fluid conversation, every day we talk budget, every day we're strategizing. When this started out, if you look at page 4,
Mhm.
the $1.7 million figure is what we were staring at.
Mhm.
That was 36 hours ago.
Wow.
Through some strategies, like as an example of capitalizing the 750 tranche for streets, roads, sidewalk improvements within public works,
The ARPA?
utilizing the $1 million from the capital money. Remember I talked about the 2 million we had, we did $1 million this year. The request would be do $1 million again this year. That would be an example of how we, there's multiple maneuver strategies on how to get this thing to balance. You can kind of see the exercise we go through. And as you go through the categories, especially like in public works, that I call an outward facing department. That does a lot of things that people
Right.
see, feel, and
Exactly.
experience, including leisure services.
Right.
What's reflective of here is as simple as there's an additional level of service expectation of maintaining, let's say, the medians, maintaining our signage that comes into the city, the big marquee signs in the plantings. There's all sorts of things, pressure washing sidewalks.
Didn't the CRA pay for those?
Not
Signs?
necessarily, the signs, yes, but the planting, the keeping up, the landscaping.
Wasn't the CRA supposed to pressure clean the lake and the sidewalks on Lake and Lucerne?
I think they do twice a year, Jamie. CRA does.
They used to, we do now.
We do it.
And we don't, and we pay for it?
We pay for it.
Yes.
Is there any reason that the CRA is not paying for it anymore?
As I understand it, Mr. William Waters, that the CRA can't spend their CRA dollars on maintenance or repair.
Huh, how convenient.
But we'll have some conversations on other strategies and maneuvers and how CRA can contribute to offsetting some expenses through CRA and chargeback, essentially like we do with finance function or IT or whatnot. The point that I'm trying to make to bring to your attention is this is the challenge that we grapple with every year, okay? And to understand and appreciate that this is, again, I'm keep driving this home, it's just fluid, it changes every day. Tomorrow staff will be going back, depending on feedback that we get tonight. And maybe the direction is an example, this is unacceptable, go back and balance this, make it 0. Or come back and give us some ideas of what are some other strategies or trade-offs. So it's a constant maneuvering of trying to balance the budget. So we can go through this down this list, but I wanted you to see the impact, where we started from and where we're at just tonight. And the conversations we need to continue to have.
Madam Mayor, may I?
I'm sorry.
2 things on the spreadsheet. The first thing I want to ask is, for COVID supplies, spray shields and liquid, I don't know what liquid means, but that $10,000, can't we attribute that to ARPA from that part of that?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so that could be 10,000 from ARPA. And then under recreation for admin, we have printing and binding cost of trilingual printing EU newsletter. Why isn't EU paying a portion of that? Why would
They could. The policy direction.
Page 404. Maybe we have a $25,000, $25,500, that should be split between electric, water, and general, in my opinion.
And
I
that's
don't know how anybody else feels about it, but.
Madam Mayor, and that's a perfect example of the policy direction and these conversations that we need to have. So absolutely, things can be spread out amongst different enterprise funds. And that is one of our strategies. And again, there's you know, Bruce didn't touch on it just yet. He may a little bit later about the financial discipline that we're trying to apply to on how we levels of fund balance, levels of pilot transfers over from our enterprise funds. You know, you don't want to just look at our enterprise funds as a way to just plug a hole.
Right.
You know, there's a fiscal approach that we have to look at things in the long term. You know, just because the hole's bigger this year, we'll transfer over 15% this year. Well, the next year, you know, we kind of want to have some consistency because it helps as we operate our businesses. And as you learn with the electric utility, and then, you know, it's ran very business-like. We look at everything. All right.
I have a question. So before we start chipping away at this and negotiating everything here, so we went over the capital side, we were also in the hole and, you know, had a lot of projects that we needed to fund that we didn't have funding for. And now we have this deficit. So is there a point where we pull them together and start saying it? Or do we say, nope, capital has, you know, we've already committed to this extra $3 million in capital projects, and we're not going to knock that down to $2 million so that we can fund another $1 million here? Or, you know, is there a trade-off between the two? Do we pull up on the two together?
The primary principle of, especially our current capital program, is that you use one-time revenues for one-time expenditures. You don't want to take your savings account, fund balance, and put it into your operating account, because once that savings account is gone, you have a structural deficit. So our current, by and large, there are exceptions, by and large, the primary source of revenues for our current capital plan are one-time expenditure, one-time revenue sources. So it would be very, very hard to mix those two components, because we don't have a lot of excess revenues or pay-go dollars that are going to the capital program. That's what historically has been difficult for the city, because they don't have, as you can see, there's not a lot of excess revenue to put into maintenance and those kind of activities, which then build up into deferred maintenance, which then over a period of time becomes capital. There's a little bit, if you take a look at this, let's see on page 3, $7,500, $7,500, $1,500 for $15,000. I'm sorry, for buildings. We said use fund balance. These are essentially one-time expenses, so we can use excess fund balance, which I'll get to a little bit later on in the presentation, to offset those expenditures.
And could something like under public services maintenance, downtown lighting contract, couldn't CRA share that cost with us since it was a CRA district?
I don't think the street lighting contract.
Downtown lighting contract? It just says $50,000.
Our contract.
Downtown lighting contract.
47,000 a year, and that's from basically the traffic circle all the way to Gulfview. And that's all of our light posts that you see the lights on. And we have a little bit extra built in there for Christmas if we want to do additional decorations.
So why, I mean, we could go to the CRA to help fund that. I mean, that's, I mean, from C Street all the way is
there.
CRA district.
And so the downtown lighting contract is for new poles and things, or light
That's
bulbs?
the actual decorative light.
Jamie, come up and explain to them the basis of the contract. And to your question, Commissioner Maliga, yes, we can have conversations with CRA on some of the expenses that you guys are seeing that exist in the CRA district.
Absolutely, they should be putting their share in. I mean, that's.
Yeah, and that's
Part of
the
being
actual
CRA.
decorative lighting that you see on the light poles, the actual lights that wrap up the poles.
I mean, even if with
Oh, the white lights, all the white lights.
Correct.
Trees being lit.
Christmas lights.
Correct.
Okay.
And we do that year round now. That's not only.
Yeah, no, it looks.
Have they ever paid in part of that contract?
We just started that contract 3 years ago,
And they've,
2 or 3, I think it was 3 years ago.
so have they ever kicked in 3 years?
No, this has been something that we've.
No, they've done some lighting expenses at the plaza for the holidays.
Well, Yeah, but as far as the actual poles themselves all the way down, that's been something we've done.
So the lights and the trees on the plaza, do we do those? Do we have a contractor that comes in and does them?
That's part of the contract now.
And that's an outside contract.
Correct.
Oh, I think the CRA should.
So like,
Yeah, that's 50 grand right there.
Mr. Bronson's up here, purchase of skid steer loader. What is that?
So that's actually going to be done this fiscal year, and won't be in the budget for 2022. But the skid steer, it's a smaller piece of heavy equipment that actually allows us to, a lot of the alleyway stuff that we do as far as the crushed concrete and asphalt millings and everything and repairing it. It's a small piece of equipment that allows us basically to level out alleyways and stuff like that. So we actually get a lot of use out of that piece of
In
equipment.
the alleys.
And we have that position as an example of grappling with the strategy of trying to balance this budget. Try to find funds in the current fiscal year to have that piece of equipment procured now. At the end of this fiscal year, when payroll attrition starts to fall, we start to get a better snapshot of what our fund balances will look like.
Right.
Then Bruce and the team go back and kind of, okay, what can we pick up now? And again, we look at these things in multi-years on how to balance these budgets.
Have we looked across other opportunities to work across departments or enterprises, because it seems like we do have a lot of contractual work. Is there any potential savings in bringing somebody in-house that can service multiple departments?
I mean, like, law, like with some of the things that,
We have a contract to go sprinkle our medians or something. I don't like all the contracts.
landscaping, for example.
Yes.
We have landscapers that we do outsource.
Correct. So our landscaping throughout the city, it's basically a combination. We have in-house crews as well as we use two different contracts with outside vendors for city lots that we own, for different areas of the city that we kind of do in conjunction.
Like with beach, we do the beach.
There is a contractor that does some of the landscaping. at the beach.
Hybrid.
So that is that's one of the
The
hybrid.
electric utility has a contract with somebody that does the tree trimming.
Correct, and that's Davy Tree, and they focus on the alleyways and actually cutting away a lot of the vegetation from the power line, the alleys and everything. So
But
that's
like for our landscaping, just as an example, we outsource it to say, what do we outsource?
There's like three or more different companies we're outsourcing our landscaping needs to.
correct. And those are different depending on the company. They're different areas of
And
the city.
what's the advantage to the city of outsourcing rather than hiring people?
Well, when I started in July of 2011, the year prior to that, there was 56 people just out of public works that were let go. And we haven't really built that up since then. So when you lose basically half of your ground staff, you have to make that up somewhere.
And that was done for budget reasons?
Always budgetary. And here's the balance. This is a good example of what the organization's been grappled with over the years. Are there pros and cons to outsourcing and privatizing certain functions? Sure. Is there pros and cons to doing it in-house? Absolutely.
Right.
But there's costs that have to be weighed out, and there's a financial strategy on which path we go down, depending on the resources available to accomplish A, B, C, and D. Level of service and what's acceptable to the community, to you as a policy board, also drives into that decision. There's things on the surface, it may seem like, well, it's better for us to do it in-house. Well, if you recall back to the pension cost, that goes up as you add FTEs to our headcount essentially. Then you deal with turnover. Then you deal with, well, we can't keep people hired. And what do we pay people? How do we get competitive? So in certain areas of different, because you oversee so many different little businesses, essentially. They all have different strategies, and which one applies and works for one, you can't apply that duplicate to others. The golf course is a good example of where an outsourcing strategy has worked out. When I first got here in 2007, we had in-house golf maintenance. The payroll alone was over $1 million.
Okay.
Now our annual maintenance contract is now that we just renewed is a little bit around $650,000. One could argue that we got a better product for less money, but that doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
But that strategically, how do we position the golf course to be financially sustainable? That was a strategy that we went down. And again, to like medians, a lot of common areas. It's very common for municipalities to outsource that type of function and then have in-house crews, kind of a blend like Jamie does. In a utopia world, yeah, we'd have control and large staff counts and have control of everything. The janitorial contract's a good example of was negatively impacted when these significant layoffs happened back in 2008, 9, is it 11?
It was a couple years before I got here, but we did used to have in-house
Right.
janitorial.
Right.
Yeah, I remember them.
So a financial strategy, thinking long-term, was, okay, we're gonna eliminate these positions. It reduced headcount, turnover, vacancies, pay, and let's push this into a contract. Now, we've been grappling with the level of service of a contract,
Mhm.
right? And we're having discussions now, well, how can we improve this level of service? Is there a hybrid? Okay, and that will come with a cost. So there's just a total balancing act on depending on the department, depending on the function. So that's a super long-winded answer, Commissioner Stokes. And hopefully it answers and kind of paints a clearer picture, but pick a spot. As I would say, insert the subject matter, insert the department. We'll be grappling and trying to figure out what's the best direction that we want to go down.
Our painters are like, there was always the guys that were like, they came in there, I forget their names, they were here forever. And they were the painters. And now, do we outsource that now, or that's all in, our painters are in-house? Like, if to paint this room, we
We
would
do that in-house.
In-house, yeah,
In-house.
yeah. Big jobs, we
Well,
have
outside the buildings,
outsource
Correct.
and contract that out. Painting the casino building, something that we would contract
Right.
out, touching up the office,
Okay.
touching up the
Okay.
guys' office.
And usually that comes with how large is the job? Because we
Right,
obviously
sure.
only have so many people
Right.
in facilities. So if it's something we can knock out in a day or two,
Mhm.
obviously doing it in-house. If we're talking it's going to be a 3 or 4 week project, we just can't commit a certain number of guys to one thing for that long
Mhm.
because a lot of other things will
Right.
get neglected.
So when you're making the decisions about, okay, we're gonna redo the medians, and like, who made the decision to, let's put lawn, grass that needs to be irrigated and mowed versus native wildflowers?
Ultimately, it can be policy direction. How do you want your city to look like?
Okay. I think we're gonna have a conversation.
I'd like to jump in, Commissioner McVoy, here on that particular one. And I'm familiar because I was there when we let a large number of employees go, so I'm familiar with how painful that was and the pros and cons of contracting. On landscaping, because of involvement with the tree board in the past, we have a commitment in the city toward native landscaping, as Commissioner Stokes referred to just now. And we've chronically had trouble that we do not do a good job of maintaining that native landscaping as it should be. And I just like us to focus on that a little bit. At some point, it probably is wiser to develop, because that kind of landscaping maintenance is very different than typical South Florida non-native stuff. And most contract folks have no clue what they're doing when they're managing native stuff. So we've lost a lot of investment at the beach particularly, but also some other places where a lot of effort was put in thoughtful native vegetation, and then it was not managed well, partly because of outsourcing it to people who didn't know how to do that.
Maybe a little more, I've noticed that too, but up at the north circle of the beach, there was this yellow flowers, sunflowers that, the ground cover. And then one day they were gone.
Dune daisies.
Dune daisy, and then one day they were just gone. It was mulch. I was like, really? So.
And that's just that's beach sunflower. That's an annual that you can regrow pretty easily. But we've also had longer term things that have just been poorly pruned or not well mulched or various things, or over pruned, where we've really lost ground on it and expense. So let's just keep that in mind.
My answer to everybody is millions.
Not a level of service, but it certainly affects what our city looks like, particularly for a city that's chosen to put a lot of emphasis in its landscaping rules.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll have a conversation another day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes back to what, Mr. Ruiz was saying before with the level of service and outsource versus what you can control and what you can't control. So.
And it boils down to cost at the end of the day.
Okay. Really, as are cheap. I've got 7,000 acres of.
Purposely will not plant anything I have to irrigate.
Right, I don't.
Because when you
I-
talk about cost.
Yeah, no. Well, the city still
Support the city,
pushes.
run your water like I do, it's great.
You got the one
I gotta
that
look at my
fancy new
pool. They
house.
got plenty out of me.
My house is clearly natural.
Okay,
Okay.
Bruce.
Thank you. Where were
Would you
we?
like to go through more detail with the schedule or?
Yeah, definitely want to offer, kind of just open up the floor, again, as we've talked, it's very beneficial to have these interactions with you as a body, with staff here. So, Bruce, we're at that kind of point of just opening the floor up, correct?
That's right.
Okay, I'm looking at the diversity and sexual harassment training. Is that the National League of Cities training that y'all, that the commissioners got last year?
No, that is internal. Those are internal annual diversity, sexual harassment trainings that are coordinated through HR for staff. The racial equity National League of Cities training that we did,
Right.
that's in the current year's budget, and we have to bring back and get policy direction on what's the next steps.
Who saw that? Was
Saw
it,
it?
yeah, I mean, who was that offered to? I mean, I
Previous
watched part
commission.
of it. It was the previous commission. Did this employees get that?
We had, I don't know, 50 some odd employees that participated, kind of a big giant, I'll call it a board, but the
To
commission.
me, that really seemed like a hasty attempt because of all the things that were going on last year. Like, we better get this done. And here the, League of Cities said, well, we've got this package deal for $14,000 and you can all listen to it.
2021.
Racial Equity Institute is who I went through, and that's who Community Partners brought in years ago, I think in 2017 or 18 when I did it. And I know that the cost was nowhere near what the League of Cities contract was, and it's a 2-day, but it's pretty intense. It's 2 days and it's 8 hours a day.
Where did you do that?
Racial Equity Institute, they actually come to you. I forgot what state they're in.
But did you do through your gym?
I believe they're in North Carolina, based there. I've done it twice, and it's
Yeah.
an excellent program, and it is a 2-day one.
We did. I did it at a church in West Palm Beach, but Community Partners put it on for people who are part of healthier Lake Worth initiatives or healthier initiatives.
Right.
But it's something we might want to look at because I know that the cost is considerably less, and the program, like Commissioner McVoy just said, is eye-opening to say the least, and they've been doing it since before the movement happened.
Because
Racial Equity Institute is called.
okay, because I would like to, if we're gonna do something like that, I would like to see the public involved with it. I mean, it's fine for the commission to sit and go, yeah. But it felt like a kind of an empty.
Wasn't it supposed to be part of that? Didn't we just start one step of that? We didn't actually execute the entire program that we paid for.
Correct. There's still another piece that has the community engagement component that we need to find time to position in and finish those steps.
There was a suggestion to have a task force in-house, but that didn't go very far.
So what I'm hearing is we can talk about bringing back and reinvigorating that where we left off,
Or get a refund.
provide an update to the policy board. And then this is a perfect example. When you talk about a line item of future commission initiatives, and there's a budget with no description. If it's a priority, then we say, Bruce Vaughn, run off. We want racial equity training. Bring back the number and we budget it for it. And then you get into the whole, okay, how do we balance?
Where do you go?
Right.
Yeah, because that just seemed like, it was for the commission and they did it. Now they could say they did it, but
That's exactly.
It was also
Right.
for department heads.
I watched part of it. It was actually on Zoom.
Most
It's
of our,
also for department heads. So then after that, it's, I think, the job from the top down to quarterly ask your department heads, what have you taken away from that and applied within your department?
And I'd like
There's
to
gotta be
involve the
constant
public.
follow-up.
I would like to involve the public in that. Have
Right, and I
them-
think that's something that our event department could take, like, there's a lot of ways to see this realized.
Mhm.
So that, I know that's another,
And we could work with our community organizations.
but
too.
just annual training every year isn't cutting it for this commission, I don't think.
Ma'am?
I have a question for Mr. Waters. The community sustainability for marketing materials and consultant services,
Page.
page 2 of the little spreadsheet thing.
additional request.
So we have $5,000 request. Is this something that now that we've changed the sustainability bonus program, that could be funded through that?
That's part of it, and I may have misunderstood the whole zero line budget process, but if you look back at the sheet, my department's asking $185,000 less than this year, and I was hoping to get a little bit more in some of the line items than this year by reallocating things and moving things around. We also already have the planning internship program. It's been very successful. We want to continue that, but we funded it from a different source.
Okay.
And the $500 for this is the business license division. Some of the people there have to go to training for business tax receipt officials to keep their certification. And we've not had it to have anybody go in a couple of years. So that line item has been kind of empty. We need to bring it back because we got three actually, who are required to have that certification. And we have a new person joining us who will need to do the first year of that.
So you found the funding, because here it says remaining to be funded.
Well, if you go back to one of the earlier pages, it shows that my impact for my department on the budget between this year and next year is a negative 185,000.
Yeah, so what I was asking is now that we have the sustainability bonus program where people are writing checks, developers, investors, can part of that pot where people are writing a check instead of getting funding credits for dog parks and things, can some of that funding come from that pot? I don't know what the logistics are of that.
The Sustainable Bonus Incentive Program is really geared toward public benefit items. A new brochure explaining whatever we come up with for that program could come out of that money, potentially. You also are going to be having 1 or 2, possibly 3 checks coming to the Transfer Development Right Program, and that can be spent on infrastructure, but there have been discussions about possibly using that money for other items that may be beneficial to the community, which aren't restricted to a rational nexus to the projects from which they came.
Okay.
And we're not done talking about the sustainability bonus.
We haven't really started.
Right, okay.
We have a compromise bridge until.
Okay.
But this is $5,000 you want funded every year, like starting next year.
Not
and then-
necessarily. It's promotional. We have a couple of brochures we'd like to update and redo. We're a little bit behind. We were going to do some this year, but because things were changing, we've held off and we'd like to redo those. And we do though, and some of them have actually been shared costs. I know that we gave some to HR and some to leisure services. Some of them actually benefit across various enterprise funds. So some of the charges can be placed on those, but it has to be connected to their type of work.
Okay, so that's something we could look at though, is taking that 5,000 from the sustainable bonus program.
And so I have to see how we spend it, make sure I don't run afoul of the internal auditor or versus the review.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I have an interest in education, and Wellington sets aside 1% of their budget for the benefit of their schools. I'm wondering if we want to look at competing with Wellington, or at least establishing that we're as interested in education as Wellington is by using that same percentage, different budgets, but the same percentage to benefit our schools.
Do we contribute to Dollars for Scholars? Are there things that or did we stop that in the past? I'm pretty sure we contributed to some programs. Do we still do that?
We have, but not consistently. It's usually by request.
And that's a offer of contribution. I'm talking about a budget item that is set aside for schools.
What do they do with it?
Well, that's to be determined, but
Well, no, what does Wellington do with it?
they give each school a certain amount of money is what I understand.
I would venture that Wellington is less economically,
Absolutely, but I'm talking about the percentage of our budget. I'm talking about
but we're having trouble paying our bills, Mr. Robinson. We don't have a surplus to
we have
say.
to prioritize where we're going to spend our money. And I want to emphasize that Lake Worth Beach is committed to education.
So I think we need to storm the school board, and I've talked about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I thought it was possibility to demonstrate that we are committed to education.
And where would you
We
take
don't have,
money from?
we obviously don't have to do it because it's not in the budget yet, but if we would like to consider it. I think it hopefully would benefit our educational system, since the school board.
Are there ways that we could have, encourage other departments to sponsor certain things? Like I know, so the CRA will sponsor this event, or, you know, I mean, FPNL does lots of promotional things to help their brand. Is there a way that we could maybe have some sponsorships of particular things that come from, look at,
To be determined.
You know.
I just, in an overall discussion, I was interested in setting aside a certain percent equal to Wellington's set aside as a discussion. The other thing I would like to, I'm interested in is incentivizing our sheriff to let us test case body cams. And if there's any contribution that we can make towards that contract that we have, or somehow step up the pace that body cams are coming to Lakewood.
I know that I've spoken to the sheriff's office, and I think Commissioner Maliga wants to comment on that.
Yes, I have as well. I'm hearing what Commissioner Stokes is saying, and being that you all were gracious enough to give me the NAPC as their liaison, I too have thought over the years about how many hours that the NAPC group has given us as volunteers, and the money that they brought to the table in the form of grants and the things they've done. And maybe we can take a look at this $10,000 pot per commissioner, mayor, and cut that in half to 5,000 to whatever our charitable cause or whatever we want to do throughout the year. And the remaining go into education and towards the NAPC.
You know what the budget balance is for the NAPC?
That's not what I asked you. But I know what they have money, but they've also earned that money.
Yeah.
But that's the NAPC's money. There are individual neighborhood associations that could use help in certain areas. I know that personally, I don't think that $10,000 for, I'm finding funding, I'm meeting with other groups to find funding for projects that I'm interested in. And I think that that's part of our job up here. It's not just to cut from places, but to bring money to the table. I'm hoping that when we go through the fees and the schedules and, we look at like the beach fund and parking, we just discovered that we thought we were charging an additional user fee on the metered parking, and we're not. So we're actually losing money there. So some of these numbers are going to be changed in the next 30, 60 days. So we also have to find money. We can't just, ask people to bring their budgets forth and then cut the budget. We have to help them find, ways to bring more money into the city.
which might be to like, I think, how many grant writers do we have right now? Half?
One part-time.
Go Jerry.
So is there a way that, when we're talking about, because right now I think it's, or are we just saying, oh, here's some extra things that we wanted to throw out that we're interested in? Is that where you were heading?
At one point, I was hoping to do a vision and a priority workshop or conversation before we got into spending money.
Well, I think if we can find a grant writer that we think will bring in more money than they cost us in salary and benefits, that's a huge win for us. I'm not here. I wasn't here when we had to decide to let go of that position previously, or downside. Did we not think that they were bringing in more money than we were paying them?
Boatload out there.
Right. So
there's also grant writers that are independent grant writers that could be like hey, listen, there's a grant out there. Do you want me to write this? Try to get this grant. I don't know that the money to pay them can come out of the grant, but if there's a significant, let's say for the arts or whatever, they bring us $50,000, we would agree then to pay them, 10% or 5%, whatever it is. I don't think that as an alternative to hiring a grant writer, because different grant writers, is my understanding, have different areas of expertise. There's some that bring in money for capital municipal projects. There's some that bring in educational things. So I'm wondering if we couldn't just let somehow get the information out that if you're a grant writer and you're good at it and you have an expertise in it, come to us and talk to us and make us a proposal. Rather than have one person on staff where now we're dealing with benefits.
We do have somebody, don't we? Juan, I know that Jess is reached out to them in regards to the DEO grant that I inquired on, and Jess was reached out. I can't remember what ladies, Dana, is that her name?
Andrea?
We use Andrea Holtz, but she's more geared to the mayor's point in infrastructure. She works very closely with water utilities on that side of the house. Let me try to break this down a little bit. I think I have some answers and provide some clarity in some of the conversations. As an example of Commissioner Stokes' question, refuse contributes $50,000 every year to help offset special events costs in the general fund through our recycling programs. Electric utility annually contributes and sponsors, street painting festival. I think they sponsor the stage for $10,000. So we have used our enterprise fund strategically to help offset and balance some things or contribute and do more into the community in different ways. One major step that's missing in the budget building process that one could argue is the most important step, and unfortunately out of anyone's control, in the timing of when you got elected, in the timing of the budget, and we've been sprinting for 103 days now, it sounds like, is sitting down as a group and having a visioning strategic planning process where you set priorities and you talk about what is important to you: education, crime reduction, affordable housing, workforce housing, maybe it's events, maybe it's whatever it might be. And until we can do that, okay, we're kind of doing things that I don't want to say piecemeal. There's a lot of thought that goes into this. Okay, but without setting that vision and identifying that strategic plan and those objectives, it can feel a little disjointed. And the reason why is because that strategic plan feeds into and drives how you resource this organization. Essentially, a lot.
And if I could comment a little bit, I've been sitting quietly for a couple of things. I agree with what Juan just said, that I think all of us, as we're looking at different things, we're saying, oh yeah, but I would like this and we'd like that. I think Juan is completely correct that we need to set aside some time to each of us bring our visions to it and then try to thumb wrestle them into some plan. I'm sure it'll be iterative as it ties to the budget, but in that vein, I would like to say that I like the idea that Commissioner Robinson mentioned of somehow showing support for education. I'm very hesitant for us to do that through our budget, because it looks to me everywhere I look, I see that we're short money rather than extra. So I have a concern with that, but I agree with the intent of looking for ways to express our support. Education really has a lot of influence of who moves here. An area that we haven't mentioned at all, we have a department that's called the Community Sustainability. And yet when you look around at other cities around the country, or even within South Florida, that name is really quite a stretch in our city. We really don't do some of the things that are typically included under the name sustainability. It's really been an economic development department, which is fine, but particularly given that Lake Worth banks and attracts people in part by having a strong environmental reputation, I think part of our visioning and budgeting needs to say, hey, we need staff, that's their responsibility to make sure that we are in fact doing some sustainable things. We have a lot of opportunity with our own utility. We have a lot of opportunity in some other ways, and we have a lot of responsibility as a coastal community. So I submit that as an area that needs focus and some funding.
It's called putting the money where your mouth is.
I have heard that expression.
But I think there's other ways that we can share, and I agree with the educational support, but I think, and we're talking really about a very little amount of, let's say, discretionary money, not a lot. Okay, less. So I think there are other ways that we can show our support for the schools rather than giving them $3,000 or $5,000, which really wouldn't go that far anyway.
Right, a piece to add on to that, I would be in support of some sort of staffing, an increased staffing for grant writing. I have a feeling that there are, particularly in the environmental area and probably in the educational area, there probably is a lot of funding out there that we would be quite eligible for because of certain aspects of our city that we probably are leaving on the table. And one, I like the idea of considering outsourcing some of it with independent grant writers, but remember that when you do bring in grants, there needs to be a contract manager also, and that's often done in overlap with the person who wrote the contract, that they're invested in making sure that we in fact do what we.
Yeah.
One of the biggest drivers for and attracting people to a city is education.
Right.
That's a fact. That's probably the first thing people look at. Not the environment, but education drives everything.
So what are you suggesting?
Investing, putting our money where our mouth is.
What
in terms of
how
education.
much more from where? And for what?
I'm just going to say a percentage, the same percent that Wellington contributes to their educational system.
I just want to say, as a,
Out of, same thing.
I worked in the public schools for 7 years, and too many times policymakers think they're just going to throw money at a problem,
Mhm.
implement a new initiative.
Yeah.
But the structural things that need to change are left unchanged, and I'm not wanting to be one of those policymakers. So when we have an actual initiative that we think is going to really lead to real results, then we can start talking about funding.
Then let's set aside something in the budget and come up with a, proposal.
We have a task force. We're gonna be launching them soon. Hopefully that we'll see some real ideas and some real suggestions that we can act on.
You created.
No, I agree with what Commissioner Stokes said, that the intent of Commissioner Robinson's comment on we want to show support for education. Yes, agree with it, but agree also with the caution that Commissioner Stokes is raising. We don't have, and that the mayor also, that we don't have a lot of money to throw. Maybe we can throw our influence either through grant writing or through some other way that's more policy or change oriented rather than just money oriented, because money is not what we have.
Right.
We don't have to spend it if we don't have a good idea to spend it for.
Well, I had a conversation early on with Erica Whitfield, and one of the things she was thinking about was if each commissioner could take and sort of sponsor or get to know and become familiar with the school in their district, so that, District 2 would be Highland Elementary, but that we each have, there are 4 districts and we have a lot of schools, to actually go and say, how can we help? I mean, sometimes it's a couple $100. South Grade Elementary, a couple of years ago, they were going to take a trip to Washington, DC. No, to Orlando for a choir concert. And when people called me and they said, I need a little help to get all the kids, there's like 5 kids that can't afford to go. So yeah, I gave them $300 so that every kid could go. So that's a very specific, I help the band, like we're helping the band. So for specific things like that, but just to say, here's some money for the schools. So the point being, if each commissioner, it's just an idea, would become acquainted with their school and their district, that would be
The
helpful.
elementary school in our
That's-
district.
Yeah.
I've been doing that, Madam Mayor. South Grade actually reached out to help their Lake Worth Beach a month and a half ago for funding for toiletries for some of their 4th and 5th graders. I put a blast out on Facebook. We've had some donations come in to people like the t-shirt factory down at the beach from Barry. So we've been doing things with South Grade for the last month.
And the neighborhood, our downtown Jewel does every summer, we get papers and books and what the kids need for school, to start school.
Yeah, so I mean, there are some things that are happening behind the scenes with some of the schools. I met with Rotary yesterday, and we're working on possibly partnering with a school drive for school supplies. So we are doing some stuff for education, but we just can't, like you said, just throw money at them because it's not really fixing the problem. And I'm hoping that the educational task force will come back and say, here's some real tangible things
We're
that
not
you
throwing
can
money
do.
anywhere. We're setting aside on a budget and then determine where it's going to be spent. That's all I'm saying. we're talking about throwing money or, we're not talking about throwing money. We're talking about setting aside a budget item to be used.
Or
And
something.
that's,
Okay,
Madam Mayor.
yes, sir. Bring us back.
Attempt. Another classic case of why strategic envisioning is extremely important.
absolutely.
With that being said, we do have the fortunate situation where we do have 16.1 million and change in ARPA money. And the school board, if I'm not mistaken, has that times many
400
times.
million.
Really?
And it breaks my heart when we hear stories of our local schools asking for donations for toiletries.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting on a bus that I will drive to the school board to talk about things needs to happen. We've been talking about it for years.
Okay, let me talk to Erica and get us on the agenda.
Yeah, and I think all of us are very in favor of that idea that the mayor and others have suggested. Let's all show up in mass at some of the school board meetings and really be assertive about, hey, our schools need better results. Help us out.
And in order for us to make a difference in our local schools, it will take far more than a line item in our budget. It will take a collective effort and a collective commitment on every family, every teacher, more importantly from the school board, to meet us somewhere on the line where they commit further to helping improve our schools. And I know education has been a top priority generations back. This isn't a new issue. But to Commissioner Stokes' point, and I appreciate what you're saying, we want to do something, invest in something that makes a difference.
Right.
Not just talk about doing something. So I look forward to scheduling that school board, but again, here we are
Right.
grappling with balancing budgets.
And what I'd like to say about going to the school board, I think it would be helpful for us until we would be more effective if we go there with, some sort of suggestion, not just
Right, that's what I
help our
was gonna
schools.
say. And if
And
you wanted
you would
to-
be the person to have some insight into that.
Right, we can, and so that we certainly are hoping that we are going to learn more about each school's needs through this task force and having a dedicated person
Okay.
doing more than that. It started off saying, they're going to attend the SAC meeting, and I'm hoping that the people who are dedicating their time to that will want to do more.
Mhm.
Schools have an EBC, I don't know, board or group or something who's dedicated to looking at what are the facilities like. And in some of our schools, there's bathrooms that don't work, things that are dangerous that I know teachers have been complaining about for years that have gone ignored. And we need to collect those items and say, what's going on? You have this money. We need you to take care of these things. And that's just the facilities.
That's
issue.
exactly what I'm talking about. And even if we started out with the facilities, if we could get an actual list of what's broken and go to the school board and go, here's our list of our little poor schools. Wellington's got plenty of money. Our kids are struggling, and we are one of the hardest hit, poorest groups of kids that we're trying to educate. We've got 27 dialects at North Grade Elementary. So we are challenged beyond a lot of the other schools that don't have to deal with that issue. So if we could get some kind of comprehensive list of just, okay, not just we need more help, but here, this is what we need. That would be great.
And maybe this is a philosophical point, but think of a university of schools that are affiliated with higher education institutions. I think there's a high school affiliated with FAU. One doesn't describe that as, oh, they're challenged by having X number of different countries represented. Instead, they see that as a benefit, and they find ways to take advantage of that and capitalize on it rather than seeing it as, oh my gosh, this is a challenge. And I think that's some of the change of mentality that we need to push on the school board and say, we have kids who are multilingual, kids who are comfortable in English, comfortable in Spanish, comfortable in a Mayan language. That should be celebrated and worked with and honored as well. Those kids are way ahead of the average American kid. Now let's make sure that they have good outcomes in their math scores or their whatever scores.
Okay. Okay, let's move.
Back to center. Bruce, I think there's a couple slides.
Does anybody want to take like a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I could use a,
7:10. Anybody want to take a break?
yes.
Yes, okay. Let's take, we'll like come back at like 10-minute break. Okay, is that all right?
7:20?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. You go have a drink, Chris.
7:20?
7:20.
I thought you said.
That's what I know.
Clerk, are we ready to roll?
We're gonna pick it up from where we were and just.
Yes.
I don't see Commissioner Maliga.
Commissioner Maliga.
Oh,
I mean, we could start and talk slowly.
She'll show up in a
She's right there.
oh, look, we have a grant specialist on here.
proposed.
Well, I know, but
Which one? What page?
12.
12?
Ben was calling me. I thought he wanted me in the city manager's office. He's like, no, out there. I'm like, I know where I'm going.
Madam Mayor, it's 7:32 and we are back live.
Thank you. Okay, let's pick it back up.
All right, let's turn to page 12 on the PowerPoint presentation. This slide just provides you an overview of 3 positions that are being requested and the costs that are associated with each. We talked about the grants specialist, the salary is $75,000, the estimated benefits, all in pension, health, et cetera, $38,008 with a total of $114,000.
And can I ask, is this a currently funded person?
No, this is not something. That's why it's requested supplemental.
Okay.
These are supplemental requests.
Madam Mayor, if I may. What you're looking at, to Bruce's description is they're proposed
Right.
based on conversations we've had leading up to today.
Oh, and this is specifically for the ARPA.
Right,
money,
well, it
right.
was an idea,
Right.
As we've talked, in the last 103 days, different ideas, we've been talking, 104, okay?
Thank you for that.
Subtract 1. ARPA, there's a workshop scheduled for July 13th.
Mhm.
Okay, that's coming to talk about ARPA, and ARPA obviously has a lot of moving pieces as well. The importance of grant writing, the importance of a grant writer that can help us go down these different programmatic avenues that we might be going down. We saw that as a wise investment, and with the ability to potentially use the ARPA funds to offset that cost, okay, as a charge back to the ARPA, program costs. We thought it would be beneficial to put this before you. And again, we talked about grants and the need for a grant writer. So there sounds like could be consensus. We don't have to make a decision tonight to continue to look at this. The salary is a placeholder. There's a quick overview of a PEPI survey, which is where you take grant titles, grant positions, various cities, and you kind of find a landing spot or somewhere. So this could go down. I don't see it going up. Okay, and it could be a combination of that we hire a full-time grant specialist, and then in combination of doing some contractual work. Maybe there's someone who specializes in this area that we can partner
To
with.
do a grant.
Right, but we're definitely gonna need help.
So this is as much a grant facilitator, administrator, than it is a grant writer.
Knowing our organization is kind of a jack of all trades, someone who can help identify, write, help with program administration from a grant perspective. And remember, as we partner with other agencies like Healthy Lake Worth or Legal Aid, we're gonna need help, a liaison kind of.
Right,
person
that's
on
what-
the grant
right.
reporting piece.
Mhm.
Very instrumental in making sure that the ARPA money, and then some,
Is
it's not
accounted.
just about ARPA,
Uh-huh.
that we do this the right way. Not to be simplistic about it. Now, the communication specialist is a position that has been requested multiple times, but resourcing.
Yeah.
Being an organization that's transparent, that promotes, that is on the cutting edge of doing cool things, whether it's social media or like newsworthy, or now we're going down the path of doing things in multiple languages, trying to up our game on how we communicate with our constituents. Ben, the communications department of one, as I like to say, it's time that we need to hire help. That position can be spread out amongst all the city funds, because like the webmaster provides a citywide benefit to all departments.
Who's our webmaster? Is that
Keith,
Keith?
the one who makes all this magic happen over our head, or one of many. And again, Lauren Bennett, Ben Kerr, Keith are kind of our unofficial, official communications department, and they're all pulling double, triple, quadruple duty. So again, this is a position that has an impact, but it's not all just general fund.
Mhm.
Okay. And then
Would they be also helping with setting up our outreach game,
yes,
not just, media?
yes. Diane, when we talked about we'll talk about during the pandemic, during COVID, we wanted to get into hard to reach areas that have a difficult time communicating. They're not going to read a flyer in English. They may not read a flyer in just traditional Latin dialect. So having someone that can help us bridge those communication gaps, and just take it to the next level, as far as what we're able to do. And again, in conversations that we've had in the 104 days, it's how we communicate, the commitment to and the different ways we communicate different platforms. To me, it sounds like it's a major priority. So
Would this be called PR?
it's more than just PR, but PR is a piece of what we do. PR marketing, community outreach, social media. I kind of like to look at it as a portfolio of how we communicate with our constituents. And any topic varies, how we communicate events, how we promote that, or how we will promote and engage the community. Maybe it's on a charrette for a project. So it's kind of more than just PR.
It's 200, over 200,000
For communications?
and leisure services.
Well, it's 60. Now, going down the list, the Leisure Services Assistant Director
Benefits.
is a position that has leisure services. It might be the second or third largest department that we have. And it's a department that has 7 unique different divisions within it. And part of running a well-run organization is having succession plans in the various departments. All of our departments have the director, assistant director, and then we have, in various cases, division manager and whatnot. In the case of leisure services, there is no who's next in line behind our current leisure services director. We had a classic case this year where Debbie Andrea, our former clerk, decided to retire, well earned, and we had an assistant,
Mhm.
kind of that
Right.
succession plan.
An
So,
example of that.
huh?
You are.
I am an example of succession planning in administration, yes. So again, this is a strategic request that has, long-term kind of view at it as well. And Lauren Bennett has done a tremendous job with her team.
Oh, yeah.
But again, she needs help, kind of a lifeline in a lot of ways.
One thing I have to say is that, I'm pretty amazed at the fact that leisure services doesn't just do what they do, but they're doing ad creation, community outreach,
Mhm.
information. I mean, they really are the central nerve hub for everything that's happening in the city that needs to get out to the residents and the business owners and vice versa. Somebody who's been part of marketing and advertising, my wife would spend $60, $70 an hour just on somebody to create artwork.
Mhm.
And we have that in-house. So we're pretty blessed in regards to that. And I think that we have asked a lot of the staff, especially through COVID.
Yeah, I'm curious, the library, what's going on with the library? Are we gonna be able to pump the library up at all that in terms of hours and stuff?
Well, just yesterday, I signed off on a PAR form that we call it a personal action request to convert a existing part-time to a full-time person. So that will help Ms. Ansel, who's here, give her a staffing level. So if someone calls out sick, we're not confronted with having to close or reduce hours on the spot.
Yeah.
The idea of expanding hours,
Right.
adding more days is something that has far greater fiscal impacts than the change that we did currently. It's not recognized in the budget. We can most definitely look at what would it cost, depending on what it is you guys as a board are asking. You know, is it 7 days a week? Is it 6 days a week? Is it 30 more hours? Maybe it's 10 more hours.
Right.
If we can get some clarity on what it is you guys are thinking, we can go back and say, okay, here's how many positions are needed in order to accomplish.
Yeah, because it would be nice for people, like after work one day, could go to, you know, if you work, if it's open to what, 11 to 2 now?
10 to 12 and then 2 to 4.
Okay, so
But
which,
July 12th, we are gonna be expanding our hours as well, so there is a new change coming.
oh, do you know what they are?
It's 12:30 to 5:30 just for July and August, so that we can have the summer camps come in the morning
Right,
and do outreach to the summer camps. So it does get us open till 5:30, but then when September comes around, we have to look at what we can do, you know, as far as.
yeah, I mean, we have a group, the small library, the little free libraries are amazing and certainly help our people
make us
that
through
are,
COVID.
yeah, oh, it's amazing, but it would be nice to have the library open, where people that work could actually go to the library and do stuff.
There is, I'm sorry, there's just one thing I wanted to add, which we haven't done the best job of promoting, is we've upped our e-services game. So even though the doors of the library aren't necessarily open, it's actually accessible 24/7 online. So I can get you that information, just you can actually check out books online. She's got magazines, newspapers. We've invested a lot of resources in.
Like Kindle, like down,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, okay. Then we gotta get the word out on that, which is a communication issue.
But it's also a
It all
place
goes
where
back.
people who don't have computers can go and physically, there's a benefit.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah,
And we also have new hotspots too. So if you wanted to check out a Wi-Fi hotspot, if you don't have Wi-Fi at home, but you do have the computer, we also added that to our services as
okay,
well.
great. Thank you. Commissioner Malika.
Looking at the revenues, I know that we're in ARPA, we had said that we're gonna be looking at 1.8 million coming back in lost revenue. Is that still
I won't hold you to that, but it's close.
close? Was that calculated in with the revenues here?
No, now you go to full fund balance
Oh,
and be used for one-time expenditure. Because you're reimbursing. Excuse me. You don't want to use one-time revenues for ongoing expenditures.
But this isn't one-time revenues, this is lost revenues for over COVID.
For one, you're only getting one lump sum payment.
right.
$1.8 million or whatever that number is. So to put $1.8 million into the budget for ongoing costs of $1.8 million, next year you will not have that $1.8 million to put in the budget.
So what does our general fund look like with that $1.8 million? The fund balance.
The fund balance, if you give me a moment,
Okay,
I'll
thank you. Jumped ahead.
And not go down this rabbit hole. The bulk of the 1.8 is gonna be made up and lost, making whole, we'll say, the enterprise funds, electric utility for the lost utility revenue, the beach fund because of lost parking revenues, and then the golf fund are your three major funds that were impacted the most from a lost revenue standpoint. The general fund wasn't as impacted by COVID, but there's probably some small incremental revenue losses that we'll present as an overall package. But again, those are ARPA related workshop things where we'll really get into the details there. Now, I do want to preface or say on the conversation about these positions, even though you see these as a request today, the harsh reality is these may not make the cut, literally.
Right. Now,
And again, it goes back to prioritizing,
Right.
you know, and it's a fluid conversation.
and going down the $15 impact, tell us about that.
Okay, the $15 an hour impact that's the impact to the general fund of bringing all positions that are currently under $15 an hour up to 15. A big majority of that are part-time positions. We have some part-time positions that are less than $15. We have a few full-time positions. So that would be the pro rata share that impacts the general fund. So if there's positions in enterprise funds, and you would see that if there's an impact there in the enterprise fund workshop.
This is general fund.
It's
people.
general fund impact.
That's not a huge impact
No.
to bring you
Nope.
back to
And
$15.
I mean, that's relative to the rest of our budget. the value of being able to state and be at 15 for everybody seems enormous relative to $44. I mean, 45.
That's something I would,
And I'm going to say for years, we've used the excuse of our demographics being poor, and we don't pay $15 an hour.
Mhm.
It's not right.
so that's something I think we can.
I think most of us agree.
Does that include the difference in what's gonna happen with the taxes? Once you take them up to $15 an hour, Bruce?
I'm sorry.
That $15 an hour increase, is that just the dollar per hour increase?
No,
Or is that including the tax and the benefit on the other end?
the $3,100 is the benefit.
Okay.
So the total is 44,000.
I think that's,
Is there any line?
Approved.
thank you, Mr.
I
McVoy.
keep forgetting he's up there. I don't
I'm
see his
just a
picture.
peanut gallery here, so they
We're
occasionally let
keeping
me
you
go.
home from now on.
I'm wondering, when we talked about, or haven't talked about priorities, whether the cost of a business development district or chamber of commerce or some benefit to commerce in the city. If it takes an investment on our part, I would think that we would get a good return on an organized business development approach to chamber of commerce's signify a successful business community. Well, I know it's difficult in Lake Worth because of a lot of reasons, I guess. We're so small that everybody's independent, but I will say that, a successful community usually has a successful chamber of commerce.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's linked to the National Chamber of Commerce, but I'm meeting with a group and I'm gonna, on the 12th of July, down at the, across Bruce and Marion Weber's old building, the Growler, the Grumbling Growler.
Mhm.
I've been starting to meet with a group of folks down there, the owners of that enterprise, Tanya, and a few other people. And on the 12th, which is a Monday, we're having wine with the mayor, which is a little bit different than coffee with the commissioner. And it's a small group, but it's starting out. I'm inviting some other people. Anybody's invited. It's that kind of grassroots business support. I mean, the National Chamber of Commerce, I'm not necessarily thrilled about joining up with, but I agree that we need an organized business, right? A business group.
If we could help establish a business development organization.
Yeah, and it's hard to know, this is a whole nother rabbit trail we can go down. What's the future of retail? What do we do with downtown? How do we get people in those, I've been told that the Peters have been approached by mostly vape stores and tattoo parlors to rent their places, and they're not willing to do that, which more kudos, some props to them. That's what I've been hearing. So that's something that we're starting, and just FYI.
Wine spelled W.
I-N-E.
Okay.
No, it's a no whining group. Okay.
As long as we're looking at a nice table here that has some blank rows on it, underneath Leisure Service Assistant Director, I do suggest that we put some sort of a sustainability coordinator on that nice empty blank line there. Just saying.
Duly noted.
Well,
Thank you for your comment.
If there's no fund, there's nothing to coordinate.
Well, these are our requests. I don't think there's funds for any of these.
We can look at a mural all day long.
I have a request of, to help us with the grant specialist, communication specialist, and leisure service assistant director. Are we gonna get more information about how the communication specialist will work with our current staff of one and what the added benefit is, we'll be able to plan 6 more town halls or actual like more outreach.
Is Ben's
or-
not running around like a crazy man trying to do everything.
And there's no
That's really the
succession plan
benefit.
for Ben.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's really, he's a one-man show. That's crazy.
Somebody's got to look at the website and update the name of the mayor here and there.
Yeah, really.
Saying it has not
Is
happened.
that important?
Does this mean we'll get less complaints on the website?
That would be nice.
His position will also help back up our one and only webmaster that we currently have as well. So it's a cumulative role, of a lot of different things.
Yeah, I mean,
Can we help quantify like added value? Yes.
what the roles and responsibilities
Would
are,
be.
and, like the leisure assistant director, that's a very generic, they're there to be a succession plan, which is important, but so by doing that, they'll be able, what are their roles and responsibilities? Are they gonna be alleviating the other people that are there? Are they gonna, is that going to in turn free them up to do other things? Like, I think, and the grant specialist too, I mean, we've talked about all the different things they possibly could do, so I just think it'd be nice to have a little more definition of what they will be doing.
And we can definitely provide, job descriptions, maybe some preliminary goals and objectives and kind of lay it out with a lot more information on some subsequent meetings.
I, for one, am happy to see that we're looking at doing job creation because we keep asking people to come to our city and create jobs. So for us to be able to add more jobs and more positions to the city, I think is positive. It sets the tone. It sets the tone that, we're investing in our city. And we also know that we've got a staff that's been extremely overworked for the last 18 months. And, unfortunately, we have to put our money where our mouth is sometimes. And if you look at the next page, Commissioner Robinson, you'd see that there is funding already partially planned out.
So the next slide, Bruce.
Thank you for your statement.
This is ARPA money.
So we talked about the gross cost up top. Below is some of the offsets that we would be looking at. We already discussed the fact that the managers, grant specialists would be funded through ARPA funding. So there would be a complete offset with that. The communication specialist, because it impacts all funds, it would share proportionally by the percentage of the budget. So that would reduce the general fund impact by $71,000. The legal service assistant director would also be allocated based on the percentage of not all funds, but those particular funds that they oversee.
So beach fund,
Exactly.
golf fund.
Of that.
Casino.
That would be a reduction of $85,000. So the total offsets would total up to $271,000. So subtracting the 271 from the 403, you're left with $132,000 impact to the general fund. And that includes the 1% impact and the 15 per hour impact.
So that's a shortage of 132,000.
And then when we start talking about our enterprise funds, we'll start seeing some of that come out of there as well.
So we talked about slide 14, where we add up all the $1,282,000. That's a nut that we have to work all these different priorities into.
Does that include this thing that we just saw, that the additional staffing for the 132,000?
That's the.
It includes that as well? Yeah, there, okay.
And we're gonna slide into, past, no comment on the sustainability, building historic preservation planning department. Where do we?
What?
Well, I'm just saying, everybody here, we're jumping on the leisure services with the, a considerable investment.
Yeah.
Request. I'm wondering if historic preservation, planning and zoning is fully funded
Fully staffed.
to benefit the future.
Yes.
Yes?
That's what I hear.
Drop the mic.
The answer is
I
yes.
didn't know that leisure services was so underfunded and sustainability is so well taken care of.
Yes,
Good.
leisure services is currently
Okay.
sustaining the storm. But again, this wasn't done in a department pecking order per se. It was, so there is no position slide for public works or community sustainability. And again, it's trying to balance everyone's request and how to position those requests, not just in this current year, but the next current year. And again, the old saying is everyone at the table can't get fed. There's not enough to go around.
I don't see everybody at the table yet, but that's okay.
So we don't need a new IT director?
We have an IT director position.
And it's funded.
It's currently funded, yes.
And what about sustainability? Are all the positions filled there? Or if not, are they funded?
All of Williams' current FTEs are fully funded.
Okay.
There's a initiative to add and fund 2 UNO inspectors. I think one we currently signed off on and one more we're getting ready to sign off on.
UNO.
UNO, use and occupancy, but that's revenue driven.
Right.
Those are easy to add, because we dedicated revenue to offset that expense.
Right.
Those things don't give us heartburn.
We'll go with public works.
Well, I mean, listen, we can open this avalanche
Well,
and start talking about
we're just,
true needs and FTE level of service. Without adding any positions, drum roll, we're at 1.2 million. We have to go back and sharpen the pencil to figure out how to balance this budget today. Okay, 1.2 million.
yeah, leisure services feels good, but, you know,
The policy conversation, direction that we need is, like I said, earlier, just because the positions are existing and being requested, doesn't mean that it's the direction that the policy board wants to go in. You have every policy ability to say, well, we want to go this way. You can take all of those off and say, we want literacy coordinator, we want community sustainability coordinator, we want outreach coordinator.
Don't give us any ideas.
So
Don't give us any ideas.
the point is there could be 4 pages. I mean, we could build a custodial crew. We could add more grounds maintenance guys. I mean. pick
But we don't have
stuff.
the money.
But we do not have the resources.
Okay, can we go back though to department heads and who has an assistant? And leisure services does not.
Does not.
So public services does utilities, electric, and leisure services. I mean, if Lauren wants to come up here and give a breakdown of what she really does, I had no idea when I got this position, like seriously had no idea the things that
What they do.
all falls under that umbrella. And it's a huge, can you go on Zoom?
Window.
Can we have?
We're gonna send him home.
So I just wanted to, let me just state that I've been working with Lauren and we have already found $26,000 in parking. We're working on taking the credit cards that they run for the pavilion rentals and making our city be seamless across the board and passing on that credit card fee. So she's not paying $85,000 in bank charges next year. So we're still working on it. So don't think that there's not more to come, but please do not disregard leisure services for the fact of what they do for this city.
not at all.
So if we have to find money to give staff help, then that's what we have to do. I'll give up my $500 a month car allowance for crying out loud that I don't need to drive a golf cart. Come on. But I mean, seriously, there are ways that, I mean, we have to really start thinking about taking care of our staff.
I agree with
Because
you.
for years after years after years, I've watched the city cut staff, not give raises, and that's enough. Enough is enough.
We, now the grants coordinator person, that's gonna be ARPA funds, really,
Hopefully, yes, that's the approach.
right? I agree with the leisure services. They are stretched so thin. And these are the guys that are like up 6 in the morning, setting up tents and
We're talking food tents,
Really
pride
hard
festivals,
work, yeah.
parades, parking, casino. I mean, they
it's like
do
they're
it all.
like the invisible.
They're minions.
elves and fairies.
There
that
are
show up
minions.
And make everything happen.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I mean, if, I think our website could be tweaked a little bit and like we could update the name of the mayor on some of
It
the,
is right.
but in terms of another, if we had to take that page of the different views, I would go with the 15%, the $15 and leisure services.
Keith, can you go back to the slide, please?
Yes, which slide?
And I fully expect, the leisure services to, with
Well-
things coming in the future, to be busier.
Right.
So they need more help.
Yes, I'm good with it. I'm
I'm
just questioning,
interpreting today.
if
Thank
we're-
you.
May I say something for the record?
Absolutely.
I'll say it from my corner. I just want to be very transparent in that just because I would be adding a body doesn't mean I can necessarily continue to take on the world. I currently need an extra body just to help me manage what I'm doing right now. So I think maybe once I get bodies and we get acclimated, I can definitely take on more, but at this time, I'm surviving, not thriving.
But do you need foot soldiers or do you need
Or do you need
more
assist-
directors? You know, I don't want to be top heavy and.
Well, in the big picture, there does need to be a succession plan for me, because when I leave, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that goes with me and no one to back up my
You
department.
said you were leaving.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, when you try to go out for maternity leave, someone needs to be here. So
I'm busy this time.
So I just wanted to lay that on the table, is that I do need help right now with
Right.
the current workload that we're.
Yeah, I personally, I would say, I would like to, and I don't know if that number of, that's, I mean, I don't know what salaries are these days, but $92,000, I.
I'm sure I will.
A lot. You know, that's, I don't know what level people are at, but that just seems like a high salary, $92,000 for that position.
Can I apply?
I know, it's like, wait a minute.
Director, you know.
And there's a process we go through for salaries. Again, it was a placeholder conversation. You know, typically if there's policy direction to add a new FT to our head count, we'll go through a PEPI survey, which gets coordinated through HR and Lauren's staff, where they benchmark what's out there, who has them, who has the titles, you benchmark against population, job description, and then you kind of start to figure out, you know, what pay grade is appropriate for this position. Then you look internally, what is the role of this position? What could be added to this position? So it could come in a little less, it could come in more, and then there's the issue of quality and being equitable across the board with other folks in different departments and different titles. And obviously, depending on the field, you know, more compensations, you know, typically industry standards a little bit more. You know, you talk about engineers, you talk about finance staff, Parks and Rec generally in the industry tends to be toward the bottom of when you look at compensation and how you benchmark against, you know, internally, and then you benchmark against other, you know, municipalities. So
And we need,
it's
I mean, we
not
need,
out of the market.
we need to be competitive and we need to keep our employees. I mean, the bottom line is that there is a large number that goes with turnover that, you know, that HR has to go through every time they have to hire a new person. And if we can start avoiding that and just put a little more money up front at good quality people, I think that's a better route than going save more money and spend it later.
And I'm wondering how much code, you know, affects the quality of life in our city.
Code.
Enforcement department.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about? And I love you,
We're
but
talking about budget, Sarah.
I know.
And you know, you don't have to smart mouth me.
I'm not, I'm asking, what does code have to
Calm
do?
down, everybody.
You haven't mentioned code yet.
Well,
And
does
if
that,
they're fully funded, then that's fine.
I think they are, aren't they?
And I would jump in here. I agree with Commissioner Robinson that we are talking budget and we're focused on one department at the moment. I think it is somewhat short-sighted of us to only focus on the existing departments and the existing things we do. A quick survey here reveals that Fort Lauderdale, Delray Beach, Boynton, West Palm Beach, I'm guessing Boca, I didn't get to them, all have sustainability departments or sustainability and resilience. Delray has 2 staff, I suspect, and I'm pretty sure West Palm Beach has more than 1 staff. We have nobody doing that kind of thing, although we have a department that's named that, but we do not have anybody who's doing actual sustainability resiliency type work. And just because we've never done it doesn't mean that that isn't a lack in what we do as a city.
I don't think anyone's going to say that, but I think my question would be, and who do we cut to hire that person?
Or what is?
I
My
would-
question- my question, is the community sustainability, which that name I always didn't like, is that department, is Williams department fully funded?
William, come up.
Hi,
Hi.
I know you have some openings, some vacancies.
We currently have 2 vacancies in the building division, a plans reviewer, code inspectors. We have 1 co-compliance officer position vacant. The use and occupancy inspection officers for working board are vacant. We have, as of 2 weeks from now, both of our senior planning community planners will be vacant. They've both gotten some really nice, amazing opportunities in other locations.
Mhm.
As a point of reference, our economic development director position was cut, and those responsibilities fell on me.
Mm.
And we had a deputy director, and that position was cut and reduced down to assistant director, which is now Aaron's position. And part of those responsibilities fell on me, which is fine. We have done some reorganization within the department to try to get at the backlog of planning and zoning items that have to be reviewed from a building permit standpoint. And hopefully in the 6th of July, we have a new customer service technician person starting, and that's going to free up somebody else to be a zoning technician. But I was talking to Juan about the other day, I don't think my department's ever been fully staffed the entire time I've been here. So it's kind of hard to get an idea of what all we could accomplish if we actually had all the positions filled, and maybe all filled for a year.
You must be hard to work for.
Are you fully funded though?
Are you funded though? Could you hire those people if?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's,
We're having interviews tomorrow. I've got 3 lined up.
okay,
All the positions are funded.
okay.
And it's competitive to where you'll get, where we're
Quality.
finding a position at a level that will hopefully prevent the turnover and we'll get people that might want to stay more than a year, or there are other.
The only
Drivers
drivers we
of
have
turnover.
is across the cities, we have no step program that once you get into a position, a way to advance yourself.
Or small too. and that's-
Right, and
yeah.
so I can't begrudge my staff getting a promotional
Sure.
opportunity, which we can't offer them.
Yeah.
Building staff this is the building division, are the most difficult to hire, because as an example, the county
There's-
had over 50 positions vacant.
Mhm.
We have done, our building official, Peter Ringle's done a really good job with their journeyman program, and it's basically a licensing education type thing. But everybody we've trained has gotten a better opportunity somewhere else as soon as they got their certifications. We lost a guy who could have been a legacy for our building official, went to Green Acres. Somebody else went and left and went to, I think, Martin County. It's difficult to keep our building staff. We do have a step program there built on the certification process in the union that allows you to give a 5% increase as they get different certifications.
Mhm.
But we have had 3 positions vacant. 5 months, I think, 6 months. And we've had almost nobody that even qualifies to be in the intern program to get their licensure. They have to be pre-approved by the state, I forgot what it's called, to allow them to step through the program and work with Peter in order to get their licensure. I think he has 2 interviews lined up when he gets back. We're hopeful, but I'm not overly optimistic. It's tough.
Yeah.
And that happens in multiple departments.
Yes.
It's rare to be fully staffed for 12 months at a time.
Mhm.
It's a constant management.
Well, that was one of the reasons that going to the sheriff and the fire department was so good, because we were training police officers and 3 years later they were going to the county. I mean, the attrition from that is hard. But hopefully we'll be able to
Is
find.
there a way to do a contract, William, when we do the internship program to where they don't bail as soon as they get the certificate, like that they have a 1-year contract with the city or when, I don't know how that works.
I'd have to let Lauren answer that question. As far as I understand, we do have a little bit of a commitment. If we pay for education and they leave within a certain period of time, they've got to repay us back for the education. But in the 2 instances where that's happened in my department, their last paycheck would not pay back what they
Right.
owed us. So we went in the hole.
Right, yeah. That's,
Yeah, so I
How do you
didn't know
collect
when we
that?
can get a contract signed or,
how do you collect it?
no, that they work for 6 months after their certificate
Yeah,
or.
but if they don't.
Long story short, it is possible, but it's not common, especially for like a lower level position.
contracts are like few and far between. They're usually senior positions, and they've changed the laws a lot around the contract, which I think you guys have seen in some of the, with Juan's contract compared to some of the other older contracts. So for like a lower level position, it's really hard.
So for internships or, what's the other word that's goes in construction,
Apprentice.
working on apprenticeship programs, there's no contract that can be signed?
It's possible. It's very rare.
We do something similar in our journeyman lineman.
Yeah, they go through
Right.
the apprentice program, but for an intern, usually they're not even here that long. They're usually here for 3 months, maybe.
Okay.
So it's usually part of your education, or a lot of times it's maybe somebody that needs their service hours. That kind
But I'm
of-
saying like with Williams' department, Mr. Waters' department, if we have people that we're putting through a journeyman or a program like that apprenticeship program, and we're paying for their certification, we're giving them the funding for the education, is there a way that we can get reciprocity back from them?
We could try.
I mean, that's just, if you're saying
I
that
get-
one of the reasons why we're
really,
losing people.
Yeah, they're really, really hard to enforce. And that's one of the things that keeps people here anyway, is the attraction of that education. So if you make it harder, if they think that there's strings attached, or like really, they may think twice, and we aren't at the highest end of the pay grade around the county to begin with.
Okay.
I think a lot of the turnover in the department is code is hard. You know, code is a really, really hard job. It's a thankless job. It doesn't pay well. It's tough.
And planners are just getting paid. I mean, some of them can just write their own checks
Pinch
nowadays.
left and right.
Mhm.
You know, the economy, we have a really, really low unemployment right now, and we can't compete against private industry.
It's crazy.
So you're saying code is a budgetary problem?
I'm saying it's a tough job, and I wouldn't want to do it. I admire the people that do.
And if we paid more, maybe.
Maybe, but still, it's a tough job. You're up there, you're being beaten up by the public. You're there to give bad news
it'd be up
usually.
everywhere.
Even if you're trying to help, I'm trying to help you, because if you don't, we're gonna have to cite you. It's a tough job. And it's not a popular job, and you know, and there's a lot of risk. In some of the really bad neighborhoods, these people go to a lot of risk. It's tough. And for not that much money, I can understand why there's turnover. I admire the people that have stayed, and that are long-term employees that have stayed. God bless them.
I will say in reference to code, we have not had a lack of talent applying for the jobs. Most are not really well suited for the job, or bring to the table the type of compassionate code compliance approach and policy we like to have for the city. We're trying to be very selective on who we have come in, because we have, as Lauren mentioned, it's a little bit difficult. We have socioeconomic issues, racial issues, social justice issues.
Training issues?
We don't really have training issues. We've been very successful in getting people through the face level trainings, and that is a step kind of program. Each level gets them another 5% increase. So that's one of the few that actually you can walk through. And we do require at least the face level 1 for each one of the code officers. Where we do struggle is on the admin end, because there's a great deal of administrative support, because Krista Simmons, as an example, basically lost her entire staff. We had one person out on an illness, and then the 2 code techs both resigned. Those have both been filled, but it takes a while to get caught up again. And so there's a lot of work out in the field, but there's just as much work in the office of paperwork. And so code compliance has struggled, especially with administrative support positions.
What about with inspectors? How are you sitting with that?
Like I mentioned earlier, we have one code compliance officer position vacant. And then we have the 2 use and occupancy officers who do all the inspections related to the business license. Those 2 positions are vacant. Yolanda's been doing some interviews. We filled one from a person from Fort Lauderdale. She's already working out pretty well. And we hope to have the other positions filled relatively soon.
And what about construction end?
Well, that's what I mentioned before. We don't, last I checked, I think Peter had 2 people possibly pre-qualified to go through the apprentice program with the state.
So how many do we have right now working?
1, 2, 4.
So we have 4 for planning and zoning for building construction.
We have 4 people
Total?
doing building permit review and inspections. We have 2 in planning and zoning, plus a zoning technician, 2 in historic preservation. And then Sherry Cole is our administrative person for planning and zoning and historic preservation. That's it.
I think at one point, not too long ago, we had 4 vacancies in code compliance.
Yes.
So it's constant.
Last year we had 6.
But remember, and this is good conversation, you will have follow-up opportunities. And if you're making your notes, to follow up with department-specific one-on-one meetings. Because if we would have went department by department, this meeting would have been part 3, and it would have been long. And it's a lot to throw at you for one workshop. So make notes. I'm hearing, potential policy ideas, coming out of this discussion. And in our follow-ups, we'll put it all on the table and try to figure out how to land this soft piece.
Spacecraft.
It's never been easy here, ever. It's always been, a balancing act, and sometimes one year an initiative can sound great one year, and maybe that's the commitment for the following year. It's always very strategic in our approach, and it's a very incremental. We're still grappling with what happened back in 2009, 10, 11. You take 53 positions out of public works. I mean, we could talk all night just about public works and level of service. And it's amazing what those guys do,
Great.
and what they grapple with, the constant turnover. It's pick a department. Pick a department.
Everything I said about what apply to refuse.
Yeah, library, you talk real world, we be open 7 days or 6 days, Cindy needs a day off. 9 to 5, whatever it might be, and it's just, again, it's resourcing. And you look at big picture, and remember, this is just general fund. Luckily, the enterprise funds have a little bit more flexibility because it's rate-based. It's an entirely different conversation in general.
I do wonder, okay, so we haven't even gotten into the operating the expense part. It seems like we've been focusing mostly on salary and staffing at least the last good chunk of time. So is that an area where we've looked at, because I know there's said like in other cities, they might spend like more than 40% on personnel, where we're like about 40%.
Well,
On
combined
salary and benefits.
You're at 40.
So 60% of our expenses are through, our contract services and our operating expenses. I'm sure you have. Have there been efforts to see if there's ways to be more efficient or things that we can put into place that would help us be more efficient in those areas?
Yeah, that's constant. It's a constant overview of how we can do things more efficiently, more effectively through our budget. But remember, the request that's in here, the detail, the operating side is zero. It was zero based on current, and there's not a lot of things to stop doing in order to pick up something new. It's pretty lean to begin with, without diving into any specifics. But again, if there's any specific area that you're looking at, we can look at it. In general fund, it's a little bit different in a lot of ways than, say, enterprise fund, or maybe there's an idea conceptually to outsource something instead of staying in the business, or you can go in a lot of different directions, depending on what that function is. Is there a specific thing you're thinking of?
No, I mean, I would expect, ideas to trickle up from the people who are on the ground. Who might see
They know what
what's
they
going on.
need.
Like, for example, I don't know, for example, what if we stopped color printing on certain items? Coloring's expensive, right? I don't know, like, when is it necessary, when isn't it? I don't, little things that people on the ground might notice that I wouldn't ever think of up here.
Through the budget process, the preparation process, there is department level input. And as we keep going down this process in the coming months, we will continue to refine. So we'll get that feedback. And depending on, and every year is a little bit different, the deficit that we're looking at, staring at, those strategies can vary from, I was here when we stopped fax machines. There's even suggestions of stop flushing the toilets, saying if it was yellow, let it mellow. If it was like, some of us, Jamie and I have been here, William we've been through some things here budgeting.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's a lot of thought and a lot of, can we do this better? Can we do this more efficient? Is this, are we getting the best ROI for this investment, and whatnot? So yes, it's a team effort.
Right, and I know in
Together.
certain industries, you're almost afraid, if I give up, if I find an efficiency in my area and give it up now, my budget's gonna be reduced and it's gonna go to some other department, I'm never gonna get that back. So I don't know if there's ways to mitigate any of that. If you found a way to cut $20,000 out of your operating expenses, you get to keep that and choose how to put it somewhere else more efficient. I don't know if that happens here.
And it does.
Elsewhere.
And there's a lot of projections and there's a lot of true up that happens, throughout this process as well. And again, I want to keep hammering. This isn't as easy as going back and saying to everyone, okay, the balance is this far off, go trim it 20% and make it whole. There's repercussions for everything. So it's very, very involved, but it's also very involved throughout the year. As we go through days and the weeks, is there a better way of doing things? There's our performance measures, the benchmarking that we're doing, and the constant evaluations of our operations to ensure we're doing things as efficient as possible.
Yeah, just as an example of that, when I see the, mostly, code, the vehicles that the driver, they don't need, a pickup truck to drive around a new code. They can have, things like that. And by the way, all the windows are tinted very dark that you can't see in, and I think that's a problem, unless it's a union issue. I think we need to get that tinting on. You can't see who's in the truck, or if they see you, and I think it's pretty beyond the legal limit of the tinting.
We'll take a look at that.
But, so when vehicle, purchases come up, I think we can be a little, they don't have to drive very far.
And our fleet replacement isn't a program in itself.
I figured.
And
But when we get there, I want to take a look at, that's the thing I want to take a look at.
Yeah, we've had to cut, fleet replacement schedule, and we've had to reduce it where, based on age, condition of a vehicle, it was scheduled to be replaced, but because of lack of resources, maybe that replacement schedule gets reduced. I think we've reduced the fleet replacement schedule the last 2 or 3 years. So, and you're looking at things in a 5-year approach. Maybe it was 500,000, maybe it was 200,000. And we said, well, we can only do 3 vehicles this year. So again, it's just 99 plates in the air and trying to balance this whole.
When do we talk
budget.
about income?
I beg your pardon, revenue sources, what?
Can you clarify? Be a little
I don't know what you
more
mean.
Specific.
Potential for revenue or sales of, any real estate to sell.
It's definitely part of our revenue, strategies and budgetary strategies, looking at how do we create new revenues? Is there room to increase revenue through increased user fees? Is there cost recovery policies that we want to implement? Again, remember, general fund there are user fees that are involved in recreation alone. There's a significant subsidy that happens, or there's, it costs X to provide this sport, that event, this sport, that program. And when you start tying it back to your revenues, you'll see the significant subsidy. Okay, that one could say as a policy, you can say, it's very common in the city, say, we want all recreation programs to be 100% cost recovery for all direct expenses.
Pay to play.
Pay to play, and again, it's policy direction. Remember, we taking bite-sized pieces at this. I can't throw everything at you at once. And we'll slowly bring things back to you, but to your point, yes, revenues need to be looked at. There'll be the fee resolution that will be coming forward with new proposed fees, rates.
Parking.
When we talk about beach, we'll talk about parking, parking rates, golf course rates, all of that goes into this big pot.
I'd like to find a way to sell our water.
This stuff is good.
Madam Mayor, I have a question if I can. In city manager on page 15 to 37, there's a huge jump in internal IT support between 20 and 21 and 22. And we have a city manager, an assistant, and an executive assistant, and I just, a $48,000 increase for internal IT support. That seems astronomical. I mean, we've doubled the number almost every year.
I think I know, Bruce, is that because of the LPRs that need to be repurposed to IT? Is that what it was?
English. What did you say?
So when we did the sales tax project of our automated license plate readers, the annual maintenance of that landed in the city manager because I was the project manager of instituting and getting that project completed. That cost, that yearly burden is going to get put back into the IT and smoothed over the entire city.
But I thought that was taken out of penny sales tax.
It will, but there's an annual cost that the penny sales tax paid for the infrastructure one time, get the cameras up, but there's the annual maintenance and the annual.
And it's $77,000.
What line is that?
It's probably not just that one. There's probably other things we'll have to look into the.
I mean, because we went from 37,018 to 37 and 19, 37 and 19, and then to 42, and now to 77, and that seems astronomical.
Does that plate reader, does that make us money? What you do, we're just talking about the plate reader?
No, it saves us money.
No, that helps PBSO catch the bad guys coming and going in and out of the city.
So we pay it.
That's a lot. I mean, I really want to look at that number because that just to me is.
I'm trying to find where that is.
Page 15 of 37.
Yeah.
Go 2 lines up where it says, or last line, internal IT support.
The last line. Yes.
It's a $48,000 increase in this year's budget. I mean, it's doubled.
Bruce, we'll look into that.
That just doesn't seem.
It jumps out. There's no, IT is one of those accounts, like, when you look at the chart of accounts, like 12-10, which is personnel, benefits, IT, utilities, the department heads, me included, kind of in a way, those aren't numbers that they put in. We don't propose it. Those are based, they're formulaic, or they're driven by our position control and our cost of payroll. So we'll go back and audit that specific line item and then break down what was the indicators in there. I have a sense that the cost for the LPR is only because our IT director talked to me about it the other day. It's fresh in my mind.
And that wasn't part of the former diocese prolonged budget on who was going to pay for that and where the funding came. They just spent the money
In IT, there's an accounting correction that needs to happen. So that cost is taken out of the city manager's office. So the IT support for city manager's office should be reflective of our workstations, number of cell phones, laptops, all the.
Yeah, but I'm saying those license plate readers to me should be accompanied with public safety, not coming out of city management operating budget.
Correct. It will come out of IT's overall, because it's one of the softwares that benefits the entire city. It's like Navalon.
But it's public safety.
Is it effective? I mean, number one, why is the sheriff pay for it? And number two, is it really that effective?
It just seems like a very big jump in 1 year.
Yeah.
And then my other question was water for under city management. Our water went from 800 to 1,000 to now this year, 3,000.
What is that?
It's percentage that gets charged back for the entire building. So probably city manager, finance department, HR, all the departments here, they take the total year cost for the water bill and they divide it with some magical formula.
Yeah, again, it's all formulatic. And last 2 years, the water bills have gone up more than what we budgeted for. So that's one of the things we talked about last year. Trying to get it
Well, if you look at 2017 and 18, it was 3,400, so it went way down and then now it's back up again.
That's what, yeah.
And then IT, and remember, IT as a fund has a cost to provide IT services. That will also get smoothed out over all the different departments. So there's a lot of indicators that can explain why it would jump, including just a typo in a way. And I'm not suggesting it's a typo, but there's always an explanation of why a jump happened. And it's usually driven by, we're doing something extra. Or, the webmaster could have been charged more towards the city manager's office, or there's a lot of things that go into that, the formulaic for IT.
I'm looking at, if you go to the top of the page, it says legal 35. I don't know, and then it just stopped. I'm not quite sure. Are all of those, I see, training and registration, lodging and transportation, is that all legal, the legal department?
No, this is ours. That's city commission. Above where we just were.
On the top of
City
page
commission.
15.
That's our budget, yeah. That's city commission budget. It carries over from 14.
Gas, lubricants and oil.
It's license plate reader, we talk about the school board budget, and we don't have a contract with them. We do have a contract with the TVSO, and like you said, Mayor, we could talk, when we renegotiate a contract this year, we can certainly talk about.
License plate.
Yeah,
Let's find out how much it is, what the actual cost is.
well, apparently it's considerable.
And what I'll do is I'll ask Captain Baird to provide a update on how we're doing in these statistics on the.
How effective is it? Yeah.
And in terms of real estate, in terms of negotiating the contract, I appreciate the understanding or the 2% increase, but the maintenance of their building that we own could be negotiated differently to our benefit.
In what way?
The cost of maintenance.
I mean, them absorbing it?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, if we had a police department, but that's our building, we'd have to maintain it anyway.
How about if they owned it?
Okay, I don't know what to say to that.
If I may.
Yes, let's get back on track. Where are we?
All right, if we can turn to page 15.
Of 37 or 71? 71. Oh,
It's 17, we're in the home stretch here.
I'm trying to stay away from
the big page.
We talked a little bit about the fund balance and developing a fund balance strategy and whatnot. The city, by virtue of a couple years of tight budgeting, a couple years ago, we were able to increase fund balance margin. This past fiscal year 20, we issued some bonds, as you know. Part of that was to recapture our paper capital, came back, and those bond proceeds in the general fund and the other governmental funds increased fund balance. So we are up around $10 million in fund balance.
Right.
Which is a pretty healthy fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would like to talk to you about, we really do not have a strong fund balance policy.
Right.
And in order for us to move forward as a municipality across all funds, we really need to develop fund balance policies for each type of fund, be it a governmental fund or an enterprise fund, because we're going to need different thresholds. The typical threshold that communities look for is 25% of their
Annual budget.
of annual budget. So for us, that would be about a little over $9 million.
9.
And then,
What is our
A year.
general fund right now?
well, you don't increase it $9 million each year. You get to $9 million, and then each year you build it up to match 25% of your budget. So if your budget goes up $100,000, multiply 25 times $100,000, and that's how much your fund balance would be. It's not $9 million each year.
Right.
So right now, we're at that threshold.
What is the fund balance right now, you said?
It's right around $10 million. We don't have audited financials, so I can't. I'm not.
Mhm.
We're
It's a
right
ballpark.
ballpark, around $10 million.
So when you're talking about a policy, you're talking about establishing a percentage of the annual budget to put into the savings
Well,
and
to
fund,
keep into fund balance.
like tithing.
Well, and so you'll see the components of the fund balance. Right now, we do not have a rainy day fund. All right, so if we get, no pun intended, if we get a hurricane or some other event, and if we need to dip into and pay, you know, that could be problematic. The capital fund, I would like to be able to establish a capital fund where we could do pay-go on a regular basis for roads and other activities. And because you do not want to borrow for ongoing maintenance.
No.
You don't want to borrow for ongoing capital projects. It's just for fiscal management. And over a period of time, you're going to be spending more money.
Right.
Because you're going to be paying not only the principal, that's a interest on that.
Yeah, and I would like, for however long we're all here, I'd like to leave it healthy.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that. And as you know, we're going to be looking at ways. I think we have a pretty good opportunity to add cash flows to the budget, but we're going to have to talk through that opportunity. And then the remaining portion of the 25%, or in this case, $2.4 million, would go to this unrestricted balance. But that would be your waterfall to get to the 25%. And that is a benchmark that the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, at Fitch, whomever, look at. So that as we continue to look at opportunities, borrowing opportunities for the could be for the enterprise funds, like utility, that underlying fiscal health provides flexibility in the future.
Sure.
And that's so. If you turn the page, this is where we are right now. If we use our current projections right now, $39 million times 25%, $9.8 million would be what our fund balance target would be. We have basically $10 million. So in 30, we can use $135,000 for capital projects type activity, which is essentially the amount of money that I earmarked on that schedule that we're looking at. The schedule that says transfer the capital for. So if you add up all those fund balance notations, it comes to about $140,000. So that was the mechanism or the strategy to fund that. But more importantly, putting the city in a fiscal, maintain that fiscal constraint.
So, and I'm horrible at math. So 25% of the unrestricted fund balance, you're saying 25% of the total.
It's right here.
Total operating budget.
Okay, so that'd be putting away $2 million a year, 24 million,
No, not each year.
keeping it at that level.
At that level.
Okay, so if we use it, put it back, okay.
And we, because of the bond proceeds that we received,
Mhm.
we can comfortably reach this policy. It's maintaining it that's going to be.
Not going into it. And if we have a hurricane and we have to go into it, then.
And that's permissible. And that's what it's there for.
Right.
It's a safeguard, without going into other funds that really shouldn't be used for those kind of purposes. If we got hit last year and 2 years ago by that Cat 5 hurricane, the board knows what we would have to come up with expenses.
So the rainy day fund, a healthy balance would be 3.9, 3 million.
Yeah, based on this recommendation.
Right. So it would be a total of 3 3,900,000, 3,400,000, and 2,466,000. The total of those three numbers, which with my computer, I could probably figure.
Here. It's on the next page.
Oh. Okay.
Six. Yeah, same page. Got it up there too.
Yeah, okay.
When we were talking about, or we didn't talk much about revenue, do we simply do ordinance changes for increased fees and stuff like that?
You have to adopt by resolution.
Resolution, and that's on a day-to-day basis. We're not,
You adopt it once a year as part of the budget. Not to say you can't do a amendment to the
Anytime.
resolution at any time.
so we want to talk about increased fees or, licenses or that affect any change?
Well, the realities are anytime you, I mean, I think the prudent approach would.
Substantial change.
Have a conversation, have staff have a conversation about what fees, different concepts. Because that can turn into a very, very lengthy conversation. And just to let you know, we have 5 more budgets to go through.
Okay.
When? When are we doing that?
You'll be receiving recommendations on how to get at these different deficits, and it'll include expenditure reductions, revenue increases, maybe it's fees, combination of fees, new fees. So what will happen is after this, when we get the next step is internally, we go back and take feedback that we've heard tonight, put it all on the table with what's there now, and start sharpening pencils and get creative and start positioning more conversations to come to you while we meet with you one-on-one and deep dive into departments specific questions. And then all that will get rolled up, for you to pass policy on it, get consensus on it, and then ultimately it lands in our fee resolution that gets adopted with the budget. So one bite at a time.
By September.
By September. It'll be here before we know it.
There are 6 more budgets. What I would recommend doing is, as part of the conversations, one-on-ones, the deep dives into the budgets. These are essentially just other departments. Beach fund, golf fund, et cetera, et cetera. And so during meetings with the city manager, that would probably be the most appropriate time. Because they're all, with the exception of IT, which we'll fix, their revenues exceed expenditures. And so they all have surplus revenues. So there's not a whole lot of difficulty, if you will, that you will need to.
It's a refreshing change.
Yes. So we went through the meat tonight. So
When's dessert?
Yes.
September.
It's a bottle of wine with my name on it. Back of the house.
a few more cookies.
And again, and Bruce, I appreciate that. And it may just require, our one-on-one times are, kind of slotted. And it may just be when we start talking about budget and introduce these conversations, time commitment on all of our parts to maybe extend those conversations a little bit longer and allow you to FaceTime with the department directors.
And this is going to be the toughest year for us because and thinking about the charter review, should we get elected in November or in March? The difference would be if we're elected in November, we have a couple months to sort of get our feet wet and not have everything piled up. And now you've got the budget. So like next year.
I think that's twofold, because when you have an election in November and it's budget in September, in my opinion, how dedicated are those who are campaigning to paying attention to the work for them, because they're really worried about campaigning instead of doing their, I don't know, just, it's twofold, right?
Yeah.
That's where the strategic plan comes into play, because when it's done right, that protects the integrity of the plan, because it's how you resource. And then it gives time for the next group that gets elected or unelected or whatnot, time to get in and then start looking at strategic plan. But I think everyone will be pleasantly surprised that our current priorities in the city, there's a lot of commonalities okay, education, crime reduction, affordable housing. There's a lot of commonalities here, because again, our things that make us unique and things that are challenges here in the city, they didn't just arrive. They didn't just arrive. And, so I look forward to it personally, professionally, to go through that conversation with this group, for sure. Anything further so we can, and let's not forget Commissioner McBoy.
we can't.
Sitting in the shadows.
Who could forget Commissioner McBoy? Hi there. No, I'm not gonna answer.
Sure.
I'm
you-
here.
And
And we appreciate you being here, sick and all.
we do.
I'm starting to fade a little, but I'm guessing you're all starting to fade a little too, but
Yeah.
Oh, we're fine.
Well, Mayor,
okay.
thank you very much for
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's a journey through uncharted for me, and I don't know who else uncharted. I mean, I don't do my own checking account. I don't. People that do that. So this is a challenge, but you've made it, easier, and we're gonna learn as we go along. So we're gonna have one-on-ones with the dessert. Okay. So are we done?
All for your patience too, because
Yes.
If I may, Madam Mayor, real quick, unrelated, before we close the meeting at the workshop. Just a reminder, I will be out of office for the next couple of days. I do want to encourage everyone to just keep an eye on the tropics. It's that time of year. And I'll be in close communications with Mr. Brown.
what a time to leave, huh, Jamie?
Really?
I sent everyone an email earlier today. Jamie will be our acting interim city manager in my absence. But I'm sure because of what's going on in the tropics and the uncertainty, Jamie and I will be talking probably pretty routinely. So depending on the forecast, I may be back sooner than anticipated. I was gonna be back to office Tuesday.
Are you flying over there? or-
Correct. But we're in great hands. We have an amazing team. They all know what to do. It's always been a team effort. So don't get any anxiety if the cone gets a little bit wider and a little bit closer to us. Right now, we're a little bit out of it. We'll be fine. And then 4th of July this weekend should be a good party. And I want to remind everyone that we're having an employee appreciation barbecue, July 16th. I'm hoping that everyone can join us and really recognize our amazing organization. I think we're 380 employees, extremely dedicated, extremely committed to making Lakewood an amazing place to not only live, but also work.
We used to have those picnics at the pool, those parties. Those employee
It's
appreciation.
hot in July, but I hear you. I hear you. So with that being said, thank you, Bruce and the
And you're
team.
taking off for the weekend?
So we'll keep the fish storage to the minimum.
I'll try to bring some fresh fish back.
Okay,
Okay, so we
Mike, I mean, I
I
just,
think we need
I
to
have to, I gotta get
end
out.
the workshop officially.
And to work.
Oh, do we have to adjourn? We have a motion to adjourn?
All right.
Mayor, we don't need a motion. We can just say that we adjourned